I've got to do this thing before we do the other thing. The other thing will happen very quickly, but I got to type Nyx Weaver in here, and then I got to get Nyx Weaver. If I don't, people fucking riot. They withhold cash money. God, I don't know. Ugin's Insight. It is a 4-mana rare. Oracle's Vault. It is a 3... Oh, it's not a 4-mana. It's 3 mana. Fuck me. Can you tell that I've had a frantic morning getting all this shit together? 3 mana artifact. But it's not a legendary artifact. Just a 3 mana artifact at rare. And it's not even Ring of Gix. Strixhaven Stadium. I think that's the only one. Shit. Hubris. Oh, is there something from MH? Oh, if it's the fucking palette. Right. Oh, it's not colorless. Oh my god. Okay, that makes it a little easier. Maybe. 3 mana, and it's not a creature. 3 mana. Oh, it's the Book of Exalted Deeds. No, it's not. That's a legendary artifact. Fuck. Crimson Vow. I don't remember any of the cards from Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt. And I refuse to remember it. Although we know it's red. Red. A red 3 mana artifact at rare. Oh, it's no, is it Mizium Tank? No, it's not a vehicle. It's oh, what the fuck is it called? It's not an equipment. Excuse me. I mean, if I get the set. Bolivia. Crimson Bride. So it's Midnight Hunt. Oh, there's I think it's Midnight Hunt. It's the whatchamacallit. The fucking it's there's a thing when you cast instants and sorceries. And it gets stuff. Is it chalice? It's like a chalice or a reservoir. What? Did I not spell? Oh. Yeah, it's this one. This one. This one. I remember seeing this card and be like, oh, it could be cool in Commander. And I remember playing it in Commander deck and it wasn't. It was just fucking bad. It was just bad and boring. Cooking up pose with an Uzi. Tom Madness for the 23rd month. When were you when Urza Saga dies? My main phase. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you're doing well. And then Darth Chewed Up. Welcome to the stream. Thank you for subscribing and supporting the channel. Enchantment. That's so much. What the fuck? And it's not Divine Visitation. It's not a curse. I was hoping to get easier ones today so I could just talk about the points. No. Creature tokens you control get +blank and have vigilance. Creature tokens you control get yada yada and big boy. Oh, what the hell is this card called? Creature tokens you control. It's fucking banned in block. What the hell is it called? Intangible Virtue, that's what it is.
Eggs.
Easy peasy.
Eggs.
Oh. I don't know why I didn't maximize this before. What is this? Is this incubate?
Eggs.
Nope.
EGGS
It's reminder text. Oh, is this a fucking... It's like an AFR card or something? I don't know. It's gonna be something from, like, AFR. And I'm not gonna know it. Because it's something from AFR. Turnt? Its creature type begins with a T. What the fuck? Tiefling? Is it a tiefling? It's not a tiefling. If I get this wrong, it's just... I mean, if it's a Universes Beyond card, I have no idea. Oh, it's a Tyrannid. Tyrant... something. Tyrant Swarm? No, it wouldn't be Swarm. Tyrant something. I don't know the names of these cards. Yeah, I knew it was a tier. It's Ravenous. Sacrifice. Tyrant. Something. What the fuck is a Tyrant something? This is not fair. It's a Warhammer card. I don't know. Tyrant Guard. Alright, we did it. Nice. Nope, never seen this card in my life. Never seen this card in my fucking life. Not once. Oh my god. Alright, get this out of my face. We have more important things to talk about. Infinitely more important things to talk about. Borea for the 64th month. How you doing? How you been? Thank you so much for all the support. Happy points day, Wheeler. Glad the council finally put max C to 8 points. See, I personally believe that max C is healthy for the format. Now, granted, I haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! In a long time. Also, I'm trying to log into the fucking Highlander thing so I can update these points. For all of you. For all of you, chat. For all of you. I will do this. All tables, points list, great. And DDT, welcome back for the 69th month. How are you doing? How have you been? Thank you so much for all the support. I hope you are doing well.
Eggs. EGGS eggs.
Well, I can make this change. I will get this change done when I'm not on camera. Camus MTG for the full year. How you doing? How you been? Let's get pointed. Yeah, baby. Let's fire it up. Thank you so much. Simbot for the 13th month. How you doing? How you been? Thank you so much for the support. Glad to have you. Good to see you. And we'll go for the 50-second month. Been a while since I remember to click the button. Oops. Also, never been happier to have all 4 of my personal decks hit by a points change. Top to bottom banger. Thank you, Wilco. Yeah, I'm very excited about these changes. And I will explain why, and I'll explain why the council's excited about these changes and why we think these changes are going to be beneficial to the format. So, if you haven't tuned in for one of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the points change that was announced today that'll go into effect tomorrow. I'm going to more or less read everything that has been written as a part of the announcement. This main write-up was written by myself, but of course, the process of writing this all up was involved with the other counselors, as well as the other counselors providing some blurbs, such as this one and some others, but people are EP, that will help provide some additional insight and some, allow us to get a little more loose with the language at times and a bit more, add a bit more personality to this. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to read this, and I'm going to take some time to discuss different points and paragraphs and cover all this stuff. People can ask questions during this. Typically, I will, once I've covered a card, I will then go back and say, well, I won't go back. Once we've covered a card, just going to fix this. We can talk about that particular card, and then we can move on. At the end of all this, I will then just effectively hold a Q&A. If anybody has questions, if anybody has comments, concerns, whatever, I will try to address them. As always, let's try to be respectful in doing this, even if you don't like the changes, or even if you think people that don't like the changes are big dummies. There's no sense in getting all riled up, because they're just points changes. And it ain't that serious. It ain't that serious. We didn't ban Mana Crypt or anything. Okay. I'm gonna have a last little bit of tea, take a sip of water, and then we're gonna kick things off. I'm out of tea. This is fucking, we're ruined. This stream's over. Stream's over. Fastest print to point ratio? Nope. But I will tell you this. The card with the fastest print to point ratio, oh no, I think Fourth Air Lingus may have been the fastest. For a while it was Spellseeker. And then it may have been Breach. And then fourth. Yeah. Or Thoracle. Thoracle would be a good one too. Pretty sure Breach was in like a week. Where it's like, hey, they made better Yawgmoth's Will. What do we do about this? Okay. So, here we go. Points updates. Announced today. Effective tomorrow, here are the following changes made to Canadian Highlander. Minsc Boo Timeless Heroes goes from 0 points to 1 point, added to the points list. Psychic Frog goes from 0 points to 1 point, added to the points list. Reanimate goes from 0 points to 1 point, added to the points list. Urza's Saga goes from 0 points to 1 point, added to the points list. White Plume Adventurer goes from 0 points to 1 point, added to the points list. Soul Ring goes from 4 points to 3 points, a deduction of 1, or a reduction. I've deduced that this card is now 3 points, a reduction of 1. Spellseeker has gone from 1 point to 0 point, removing it from the points list. And Survival of the Fittest has gone from 1 point to 0 points, removing it from the points list. This is a massive set of changes. This is also a set of changes that, when I say massive, I'm mostly referring to the quantity of cards being changed here, where we do expect this obviously to have quite an impact on how players approach building their decks, approach their available points, and also these points do impact some of the top tier archetypes in some form or fashion. I'm going to comment on that more as we go through, because it is mentioned that, hey, this is a lot, but also it's not going to be the end of it. We're not putting these points out there and then cleaning our hands and going, good job, everybody, we're done. Because no, we're not. We got some more work to do. That additional work is going to come down the line, and it may take a slightly different form than what it does here, but just letting you know, there's a lot of stuff added here. Some cards taken away, some updates on the philosophy, and we are looking to communicate that to the community at large, right? I'm going to read this paragraph after I say thank you to It's Min Min for the 3rd month. Happy New Year, Wheeler. Keep up the good work. Very proud of you. Oh, thank you, Min Min. Happy New Year to you too. Thank you so much for the support. I'm going to read through this, and hopefully that'll also, highlight some of the things that we're looking to do as we move throughout the new year and as we try to catch up with current design sensibilities. With a new year of Canadian Highlander ahead of us, the Council is looking to take a fresh approach to pointing philosophy, specifically regarding 1-point cards. While we cannot reasonably keep up with the continued printing of powerful threats, especially those printed in non-rotating releases, we can take steps to soften the homogeneity, of point spreads and the multicolored value piles currently defining the format. So, new year, new us, right? We're looking to do something with the points list that we haven't really done in a while, which is add a bunch of new 1-pointed cards. Anytime a card gets added to the points list, it's always a big event. Even if it's something as ubiquitous as Fourth Air Lingus or Underworld Breach, right? Like cards that were printed and immediately added, and it's like, oh, that's fine. I didn't want to play against these every single matchup anyways. This was too powerful. This was too widespread, right? 1 point, and that's paired with whenever a 1-point card is removed from the points list, often the reaction is, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. I wasn't playing this card anyways. Sometimes it's a bit spicier than that, but most of the time it's just like, yeah, sure. This one has a little bit of a spicy one in it, but overall, people are more impacted by adding cards than removing cards. Because when we add cards, we're in a way telling people no. And people don't like to be told no, even if it is correct. But that is something that we realistically need to change, right? We mentioned that we can't keep up with the current speed in which new product comes out. That's just not realistic. We are a fan format. We are a community-driven format. And I'm not going to break NDAs to be like, hey, this card's coming out in 6 months. We need to deal with it. That's not happening, right? And so we can address some of these cards, but it takes time. We don't have the data, right? Canadian Highlander is not a format with a ton of play being recorded. We do our best, but we don't look at data as the be all end all. We don't have, thousands and thousands of moto leagues. We don't have massive tournaments where you got thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on the line. We are a community driven format, and that means that things take more time. So we can't deal with every single thing, right? And we aren't trying to deal with every single thing, because if you're dying to a new card that came out that everybody is hyped on, it's because it's in everybody's deck, not just because it's powerful, but also because it's a new toy. And if you haven't been dying to this card before because it didn't exist, and then you start dying to this card, well, yeah, you're going to feel like it's everywhere, like it's oppressive, like this is a thing that I wasn't dying to and now I'm dying to it. How am I going to deal with this, right? So we can't deal with that reasonably. But we are looking to take the idea of pointing some of these newer cards that have some pretty terrible implications for gameplay, right? A majority of the cards we're looking to address with this announcement fall under the category of self-perpetuating engines. Cards that continuously provide pressure or card advantage at little to no cost beyond understanding the individual mechanics. Once introduced, the game shifts solely to being about managing these cards and their accompanying mechanics. I wanted to add this in because somebody would be like, White Plume Adventurer is just a 3/3. Just, bolt it. It's like, okay, well, the 3/3 isn't as big of an issue as the initiative, but it is an issue. Or flat out ignoring them in an attempt to end the game before they can truly matter. Neither of these options are particularly healthy, and that adding them to the points list will help reduce the frequency of these moments. Canadian Highlander going into the 2020s was a victim of, an updated design, set of design principles, an updated philosophy when it comes to the power level of cards, specifically those that had been printed in non-rotating releases. So Modern Horizons products, Commander products, whatever, where they want to just throw shit in that are going to be wickedly powerful to get players that would not typically be buying these products, right? Like, this is the issue with True Name Nemesis bumped up to the max, effectively, right? And there are some cards released in these products that are complete power outliers, right? Those are some of the cards that we are tackling here. There are some complete power outliers that we are not addressing in this points list, points list update, but are, on our mind for future updates. And there are some that receive, splash damage. Like Nadu is a big one where people talked about Nadu. We've talked about Nadu a bit, but obviously there's no Nadu here. In fact, there are some cards that may benefit builds of Nadu. However, there are some cards here that are often paired with Nadu that will make the Nadu decks have to, play more of a Nadu game and not a non-Nadu game until we Nadu. You know what I mean? The category of self-perpetuating engines, cards that continuously provide pressure or card advantage at little to no cost beyond their individual mechanics. We're not saying that cards can't be good. We're not saying that cards can't fuel into themselves. There are a lot of cards designed this way, right? Sentinel of the Nameless City. It's a creature that makes a map token when it ETBs or attacks. You use that map to make your Sentinel bigger so you can attack and make more map tokens. And those map tokens can continuously make the Sentinel bigger. The end. Stuff like that, totally fine. Stuff like that, even at an increased rate, can be totally fine. But the cards that we've picked here, especially cards like Psychic Frog, or Urza Saga, or White Plume, or Minsc Boo, push that to a limit that kind of ruins gameplay. A Psychic Frog on turn 2 is often game over for a lot of archetypes that don't have access to Swords to Plowshares, Prismatic Ending, that kind of thing. Or even, black decks that did not have Fatal Push, or players that decided to not include, Blood Chief's Thirst in their list, or whatever. Because you're looking at that cut down, that snuff out, that dismember, whatever, and you feel like a fucking idiot, right? And that's okay to some extent. But because of Canadian Highlander's position as a format without a sideboard, we need to be able to address the proactive threats rather than address like the reactive cards. Because one, you deal with the Dark Ritual, you don't deal with, you deal with the Mental Misstep. You deal with the Necropotence, you don't deal with the Disenchant or whatever. Like, they could print the most fucked up Disenchant and you're not targeting it. Yeah, Swords to Plowshares isn't getting pointed or whatever. And part of that is because we don't have a sideboard, right? And players can play these incredibly messed up proactive cards and have a whole bunch of them, but they need to pay some amount of cost in doing so, because when unchecked, these cards are messed up and they're everywhere. And it's all the game is about, and it kind of just leads to gameplay that is looking to just high roll your opponent without any real option for a proper response, right? So these cards that just warp the game around themselves, we're looking to reduce their appearances a bit in a way that says like, hey, if you want to be doing this, you can pay points to be doing this, but you are going to have to, make some, you're going to have to make a decision, right? That's one of the big things. I didn't really put it in this intro because it's a hard thing to articulate in written word without it coming off as condescending. But if I'm talking about it, I can sound as condescending as I want. We want players to either make decisions that matter or make decisions that feel like they matter, right? Now, the decisions they make that they, as a player, feel like they matter may not actually matter that much in the grand scheme of things, right? Selecting your one-pointed card, like if you have 9 points devoted somewhere, selecting your card, like if you're on Ancestral Recall, the next 2 cards you play don't matter too much, right? They can in some cases, like, I'm playing Mystical Tutor so I can get my 4th Aerolingus and I feel really smart for playing this, or I'm playing Treasure Cruise, but I'm not playing Dig Through Time because I only have so much Delve and I'm playing Abhor Inoculus. Like, that feels good. That is a decision that players make. That is a decision that players make at all skill levels. And that's great. It leads to conversation. It leads to players feeling like their decisions matter. And it leads to some amount of diversity even amongst top tiering decks. It's also the thing that players get the most obstinate about. They get really kind of locked in for like, nope, your points are this, you're only doing this, I wouldn't do anything else. That's not the most healthy way to approach things, but it is a way to approach your points list, and specifically your 1-point cards, because they clearly give a shit, right? And that's good. You want to have an invested player base. And so a whole bunch of new 1-point cards mean that players are now making more decisions. Going for a wide point spread is more appealing. People feel a lot better when they draw their 1-pointed card and it does a thing, because these are all 1-point cards that deliver, right? You play your Psychic Frog, it destroys your opponent, and you're like, hell yeah. I had the foresight to include Psychic Frog in my deck, despite it now being a point. This is great. That's what we're really looking to do. We are looking to give players either agency, the feeling of agency, or at least minimizing the appearance rate of these cards, as they tend to warp the game. But if they warp the game and that was your decision to include it and make them warp the game, hell yeah. Right? That's great. That's what we're looking for. I will comment that once introduced the game shifts solely to be about managing these cards and their mechanics, flat out ignoring them in an attempt to end the game before they can truly matter. And neither of these options are particularly healthy. It's when you have these cards everywhere, one of the best things that you can do is just ignore them, because you're not always going to have the right thing at the right time, especially if they are everywhere, right? If your opponent leads on like an Urza Saga and you're like, oh shit, I got to deal with this Urza Saga, and they do it into like a white plume, or they do it into a Minsc Boo or whatever, or they Psychic Frog and you're like, shit, I got to deal with Psychic Frog, and then you spend all these resources trying to deal with this really difficult card to deal with, only for them to set up a Reanimate. That fucking sucks, right? That'll happen in Magic the Gathering. That'll happen in Canadian Highlander. But the fact that it's happening off of these cards in particular, where they are must answer, because what do you go to do? Just let the Psychic Frog rock? No, this isn't like deciding whether or not, should I use this removal spell on the Jackal Pup? Or are they going to untap and play like a Rabble Master or a Gut or whatever? I picked Jackal Pup. I know it's Jackal Pup, but you get what I'm saying, right? And so often the best way to do this is like, I know, I'm just going to ignore them. I'm just going to combo as fast as I can. I'm going to play Time Vault. I'm going to play a Citadel Storm list. I'm going to just do my own thing and ignore what you are doing, because what you're doing is bullshit. Reanimator also kind of plays into that, where it's like, yeah, you can play whatever you want. I'm going to put this Gristlebrand or this Archon of Cruelty into play or whatever. Or Flash Hulk. Yeah, exactly. Like, there are archetypes that have really benefited from the printing of these cards and the abundance of these cards that can lend to the metagame looking more diverse than it actually is. But diverse in a way that is not that healthy. There's going to be some amount of RPS no matter what ends up on the points list. And the metagame is always going to be diverse in a sense, because this is Canadian Highlander. People play this format because they like to play this format. They don't play this format because they're trying to hit the Pro Tour or whatever. There's always a ton of personal bias that goes into everything. And that's okay. But we have noticed the trend of the combo decks effectively just being like, oh yeah, I'm just going to ignore whatever the fuck it is you're doing. Which they always kind of do that, but we want to minimize that just a bit. The council also recognizes the role the 5 Moxen play in the overall increased speed and pacing of the format, and will be primarily focusing on their role in Canadian Highlander over the next several months. Moxen at 3 points has been a core pillar of the format for years, and changing that is something we don't take lightly. This ongoing discussion may lead to additional cards being added to the points list, or potentially walking back certain changes introduced with this announcement. We're trying to set expectations here, because Moxen have been a hot button issue no matter where you are, right? They are, in some metagames, they are going to be more prevalent than others. But they are a topic of discussion that has popped up no matter which metagame you're coming from. And there have been cries for Moxen to be addressed. There have been cries for the points list to be even bigger than what we're adding here, right? We have seen people say, well, the way you deal with Moxen is make them 4 points. Well, the way you try to limit the power of Moxen is you tack on a whole bunch of points to these really powerful, snowballing, proactive threats, right? This is where you get people talking about pointing cards like Barrowgoyf or Tameo or Broadside Bombardiers, that sort of thing. And then you also just have people that say, why not both? And admittedly, very tough thing to tackle, because Moxen, whether or not you like playing against them, like playing with them, they are a pillar of the format, right? No matter what changes we make to Canadian Highlander, players are going to gravitate towards playing point spreads with Power 9, because that's the fucking sell of the format, right? If you asked a ton of people why they play Canadian Highlander, like you talk to 1,000 people or whatever, why they play Canadian Highlander, I guarantee a majority of those players are going to mention the ability to play basically everything. Oh, did I say Pylander? Oh, hell yeah, let's go. Minor spelling mistake. They're going to mention Power 9. It's the same reason why people want to play Vintage Cube and not Legacy Cube or whatever, right? There is a certain novelty to playing with Power 9. There's a certain addictive element to playing with Power 9. And so we recognize that these cards are popular, they are very powerful, and that they are, like I said, pillars of the format. They are things that players gravitate towards. And so anytime we change the points on the Power 9, that's when we get a ton of attention. Time Walk going down, people eyes glued to it, like, holy shit. We are back to a format where Time Walk is now less points than something like Black Lotus or Ancestral Recall. When Recall got bumped to 8, people were like, holy shit, that's the highest point total that we've ever had on a card, except for, I think there was a time when where you experimented with a card being like a flat 10 points. Computer, stop. That's my laundry. I'm going to have to get it in a second here, so I don't have to wear this tracksuit all day. They draw a lot of attention. So if we are approaching the role of Moxen in the format, and we are approaching the role of Moxen in relation to these incredibly powerful snowballing threats, we have a pretty difficult decision on our hands. The way that we as a council have decided to approach this is by addressing some of the best self-contained, self-perpetuating engines that are at their worst when backed by Moxen, right? When they are at their most powerful, when they are accelerated, like they're already difficult to deal with. There's very little counterplay that can come with a lot of these cards, but they are at their worst when they are introduced to the game way ahead of schedule, right? Fast mana is a huge problem in Eternal Magic formats. Fast mana is also a huge feature in Eternal Magic formats. They can be the same thing, but that's kind of what players are signing up for, right? So I put this in here to say, like, hey, we're talking about this. This is the thing we have our eyes on. And we're making these changes because we believe that adding these cards to the points list will help us better form whether or not the Moxen are going to stay at 3, as well as these cards we want to see less of them. We want them to be less ubiquitous. We want them to be less, we want them to not show up as much, or when they do, players are going to pay points in order to do so, right? And we want them to ideally show up at a slower pace, right? If somebody's on Triple Mox Minsc Boo and they're or Triple Mox Saga or whatever, Triple Mox White Plume, then yeah, they're still going to get it. You know, they'll have their, across 7s and a 6, you're going to have a Mox like 27% of the time, something like that. Yeah, they're going to have that, but they have paid the points in order to do that, right? It is much scarier for them to go Mox Draw White Plume or Mox Draw Minsc Boo, Mox Draw Saga than it is for them to go, like, I don't know, even Mox Draw Bombardiers. Mox Draw Fable's still scary as shit, though, you know. This ongoing discussion may lead to additional cards being added to the points list, or potentially walking back certain changes introduced with this announcement. Here's the beautiful thing about pointing and curating Canadian Highlander. A lot of what we do is not informed by capitalism, right? We're not making money off. I mean, I'm making money off of this. It is my job to talk about this format and to play this format, but that is not impacting any points decisions, right? And so we can make a change and say, like, hey, Psychic Frog's now 1 point. And you may have people that are like, well, I just bought my Psychic Frog. And it's like, good news. You can still play it. Still quite good. Definitely powerful at 1. But we could also walk that back, right? We want to cast a wide net and then down the line see, well, how did this actually impact these archetypes, right? How does it turn out that, like, oh, Reanimator's now dead because it got 2 points added to it, or like, hey, maybe Spellseeker going to 0 made this archetype a lot stronger. So do we address Spellseeker, or do we address other cards in that archetype that may needed attention? I cover that a bit more once we actually get to the Spellseeker portion of this breakdown. But yeah, it's we are open to making these decisions and then responding to feedback, some information that we receive through tournament results, vibes, big, very important. Unfortunately, that's kind of just how a lot of these decisions are made, is, well, vibes and general feel. But we have that ability. We are not tied down by necessarily a specific release schedule. We're not tied down by, well, we can't ban this from Modern because the Tolkien Foundation is going to hit us with a lawsuit. We need to still sell this product, so we can't ban this card. You know, we're not tied to doing that. And that's great. Means that we can make changes with the benefit of the format being the first, foremost, and basically the only thing in mind, right? And yeah, we don't do it that often, the walk back. Sometimes we do, but you know, you gotta take the change. Like the worst case Ontario is like if we make a change and then it's like, hey, this Seeker Walk deck sure is fucked. It's like, well, for the next couple of months, you can either just deal with that, adapt, or play something else, or you know, there are a bunch of options in your toolbox as a player to respond to archetypes becoming much stronger. There is a sacrifice, obviously, for the other archetypes, but you know, it's, if it is very apparently fucked up, we have the tools to change that, and we have the tools to listen to people expressing dissent with some of the changes. Or if they're like, hey, I like this initially, but after playing with it, I miss my Minsc Boo or whatever, then it's like, yeah, okay, we can take that to heart and maybe make a change accordingly. We're not locked into this. But also, again, setting expectations. This doesn't mean that we are going to necessarily take the approach of pointing a bunch of things up to 1 every couple of months, right? We are not opening the floodgates with this. These are all power outliers. They are all messed up Magic the Gathering cards. And there's a reason why these cards in particular were tacked on the points list first and foremost, right? Before anything else. Before we add a Nadu, before we add the One Ring. These kind of cards are the ones that we're looking at first. The council has spent the past several months working on these changes in order to usher in a new year of Canadian Highlander with some exciting changes. Nope, I'm not using changes twice. Amateur hour. Exciting updates. We are also making strides in bolstering communication and transparency with the greater Canadian Highlander community. And we hope the additional inserts regarding the changes. Oh yes, the additional Canlander inserts reinforce that. As a reminder, a unanimous vote is required in order for cards to be added or removed from the points list. And we hope the results from these votes and the changes they bring about reflect a unified council working on making the best format possible. So, full disclosure, I've been very vocal about how I felt about the last changes. The timing, like there were changes made where, I mean, I can scroll up and show you. This happened. When October 24th, when was that? On a Thursday. An update happened, right? Thoracle went to 6, Strip went to 1, Ren 6 went up to 1. Votes were unanimous, explanations followed. That's it. On a fucking Thursday. Peps told me why it happened, and while I don't agree with it, I get where he was coming from. And obviously the council stands by all these decisions, but we said like, hey, doing stuff like this, we need to maybe take a slightly different approach to doing this. Yeah, I was on a plane. I had no, like that, or was I think that was Vegas. Yeah. Had no idea that that was going to drop then and there. That was not a part of the discussion. And there's not really a follow-up there. This is something that I would like to write up at some other time. I said that I would probably flesh it out with this update, but this update got very large, and I didn't want to distract people from all these changes that were made. But yeah, we wanted to show people that with this update, we worked our asses off, right? We spent a long time churning these out. A lot of these changes were ones discussed even before this update. Fuck, even before this update. Like this past one with when is this from? June 2024. Like the discussion surrounding stuff like Urza Saga and Minsc Boo, discussing survival, White Plume Adventurer, all this shit was happening like a year in advance, more or less. Psychic Frog, bit of a different story there. But yeah, this was all been going on for quite some time. This kind of ties back into the slower process involved with points changes, but we deem it to be necessary, right? If we're doing this, despite the fact that we could just walk it back if we really want to, we want to, if we are taking actions, we want to be confident in the actions that we are taking, right? We want to really believe what we are doing, especially something like this, right? In order for the cards to be added or removed, you need a unanimous vote. And took a lot of conversation to get to a unanimous vote one way or the other, with players willing to spend the time to push back announcements. This announcement got pushed back a couple of times to try and really hash it out so that we are all on the same page, to try and show that we as a council are actively working together, working amongst ourselves, but also reaching out to members of the Discord community. You know, tournament organizers in the Discord community, working with the Discord Points Council, reaching out to players that are not on the Discord, but are leading metagames and communities with numbers that dwarf even Yellow Jackets Weekly or these larger events. Like, let me tell you this, there are fucking Canlander tournaments just out there. Just out there. Like weeklies or monthlies putting up like 2015 numbers, and these people are offline. They are not, or they're barely engaging online. Thankfully, they do make it out to like Magic Cons. They make it out to larger events, and I'm able to talk to them and reach out to them and listen to them. Canlander's big. It's gotten pretty big. And when you got such a big, passionate community, you want to make sure that those members feel heard, or at the very least, you know, you want to, you want some acknowledgement, right? So that was the big theme behind a lot of these changes. We want to show folks that we're all on the same schedule. We're doing the footwork to get this done. We are relaying as much as we can as to why these changes are being made, what these changes mean in our pointing philosophy, what they don't mean, and what players can expect, like moving forward, or at least what they can, you know, have some insight in the process. Excuse me. Yeah. So I'm going to now get into the individual cards. But before that, I really need to get my laundry. I really need to get my laundry. I can't go to the office looking like this. I need to get my laundry. So 1 second. Okay. Before I move on to the individual cards, does anybody have any questions regarding points philosophy or Canlander communication, council communication, anything like that? Damn, I booked it up those steps. Do I think that Frog and Minsc Boo are on the same power level? What do you mean? Apples and oranges. Reception being so far? Positive. Very positive. Did any other cards get voted on, or is that too inside baseball? No, it is not. We typically, if we vote on other cards, even if the votes are unsuccessful, we will post those results. I think I can probably show you. Like with this update. Previous update. Additionally, the council voted on the following cards, but no changes will be made as per the results. So we voted on Pod going to 0. At the time, the results were 3-2. Because that would have been Birthing Pod from 1 to 0, removing from the points list, it would need a unanimous vote. Wow, it was a big stinker. No. But this was like what? That was October 2023. Yeah, Minsc Boo, Urza Saga, White, I think even White Plume Adventurer have all been voted on previously. They've all been in the discussion as well. Yeah, we try when that happens, we try to have it posted. But for something like this, where there were so many changes, we tried to stay on task. There were some other cards that got discussed. I'll get to that when I get to the end, but yeah, tried to stay on task. Pointless philosophy is shift away from combo, attack, and mid-range. You want to talk about the current philosophy? Yeah, it used to be that blue decks and similar archetypes could not... it used to be that deck lists would have to occasionally pick an avenue. You would need to have pressure and minimal disruption, or you would need to have a ton of disruption and tools to control the board or control the game, but you would not have as much pressure. That has kind of dissolved over the past 5 years, I want to say. And so now we are getting to a point where not only is it just difficult to classify a lot of decks, it is getting difficult to address a lot of decks, right? Like, you could look at a deck that runs 35, 36 lands that has a ton of one-drop creatures that a lot of people may deem aggressive, and they will say they're a control deck, and you kind of have to take that at face value, right? Combo has stayed combo. Combo decks just are still doing the same thing that they were always doing. But the game has changed. And in that change, a lot of combo decks have gotten weaker, right? They have gotten weaker because these decks, the blue decks that you could maybe overwhelm, now have pressure, right? They now have Orcish Bowmasters and Ragavan and Psychic Frog and whatever to be able to combat these combo decks, but they still get to play all of their counter suite. But they're not quite tempo. They're not playing cards that go tempo or card negative to receive some additional some additional advantage or temporary advantage. They're just playing cards to interact, and they have the pressure, and it is fucked. And so, yeah, and we are also seeing a lot of design trends that, like juiced up design trends that go towards board-based gameplay, which is why we are seeing the shift for these blue decks and these Moxen decks and whatnot. And so if Wizards is paying more attention to these, then naturally other formats are also going to pay more attention to these cards. But that said, we have been addressing combo. In fact, when playable combo cards show up, it runs a shit, right? Like, when playable combo cards show up, it's bad news for us. Underworld Breach gets pointed. Oh fuck, dealt with. Thassa's Oracle gets printed. Oh shit, deal with it right away. Wishclaw, right? If you look at the Canadian Highlander, if you look at the Canadian Highlander points list, don't, because I'm in the middle of updating it. But if you look at the cards that have been added, new cards that have been added in, say, the past 5 years, the cards that have been added, let's see, we have Fourth Aerolingus, which isn't combo, but I mean, come on. It's kind of a combo card in the sense that you combine Mystical Tutor with Fourth Aerolingus and kill your opponent. But it's not, for the sake of this discussion, it's not a combo card. Ancient Tomb, hard to classify it as one or the other. It is very scary as a mid-range card, but also shows up in Academy combo decks all the time. Then we have Tainted Pact, Thassa's Oracle, Underworld Breach, Wishclaw Talisman. We got Ren and 6 too. So we have two. Ren and 6 is not a combo card. But I will say, like, out of all the cards that have been added in, let's say, the past 5 years or whatnot, you have 4 dedicated combo cards being added. And then you have 2 mid-range / considerations towards top tier archetypes like Jeskai or Check Pile or whatever. And 1 card that probably should have been on the points list a decade ago. Right? Yeah. Yep. Situation with Nadu and Canlander. Nadu's very good. Planning on winning in 2025. Look, if I can come in and at least clutch 1 Monday night, I can win in 2025. I know I said this last year and I failed. But this year, I would like to play a lot more Canadian Highlander. I would like to play more Canadian Highlander. Thankfully, I believe I'll get to do that. I have legitimately made business decisions that are detrimental to me so that I can play more Canadian Highlander on Monday nights, so that I can play more Canadian Highlander on stream, although that one's not detrimental. But Angel and I have been talking about, doing it, not committing to an every week, once a week, but Angel and I had a lot of fun just jamming Canlander for 5 hours, playing a variety of decks, and that's something that we're going to be doing again on Saturday. Yeah, I'm going to be trying to play a lot more Canadian Highlander. I'm going to be trying to, reach out to other people to play more Canadian Highlander. My goals for MagicCon attendance are also going to be more focused around Canadian Highlander as well. It's, yeah. I would like to make more of an effort because I did play a lot of Canadian Highlander in 2024. Just a lot of it was in the shadows or on camera or in a room that smelled like weed, booze, and carpet beef. That one's for Evan. Or at a pool. Yes, a lot of Canadian Highlander. A lot of poolside airport Canadian Highlander. Oh yes, the green machine. And the green machine. Okay, all right. Let me get back on topic. Let me get back on topic. Fuck is carpet beef? When you have the beef and broccoli and you drop it on the carpet and you're like, oh no. That's carpet beef. All right, one last one. Given WotC keeps printing these powerful self-perpetuating engines, is the idea of fresh pointing philosophy to keep pointing the newly printed engines? If so, can you envision a future where once there are enough of these engines printed, the council removes them all from the points list? No and no. just because we are pointing what cards need to be evaluated on an individual level as well as the relation to other cards on the points list and top appearing archetypes and whatnot. And so just because one gets pointed doesn't mean that the other ones will get pointed, right? Again, a lot of the cards that we have here, basically all of them, are just power outliers. There's a lot of fucked up cards that get printed. A lot of these self-perpetuating engines, because that's just where modern design is heading. And we're not trying to say you can't do that. Cards aren't allowed to do this because cards have been able to do this for decades, right? Just not at this level. And sometimes they go a little too hard. And even Wizards acknowledges, hey, we went a little too hard with cards like Psychic Frog or Nadu. Let's address, and then they take action on those cards. And we are going to look to take a somewhat similar approach in that, obvious power outliers, Psychic Frog or Urza Saga, Minsc Boo, White Plume, these cards, they will be addressed. But it's not saying that every time this kind of card shows up, will they be addressed. And also, even if we hit a critical mass, and go we are adding a lot of cards to this list. I can't foresee that happening. Australia is right over there. They have a format where they do that. Completely different thing. I understand, please, this isn't a jab at Australians. But yeah, I don't believe that's the thing we're going to be doing. Tilt all the certain ways. I don't know if they do that anymore, but that was the YJ mouse. Ahoy, Rachel. How you doing? Or Canlander by Bodies of Water. When are we going to have the Magic Cruise? The Canlander Cruise. There is a boat that goes from Victoria all the way up to Alaska. We can all jump on that and just play Canadian Highlander. Okay. Let me start talking about the individual cards. And reminder, as we start talking about the individual cards, I am going to read them through, talk about the votes, and then, the votes are kind of boring. We all 5-0'd these. And then I'm going to open up the floor to questions specifically about these cards.
Another one.
Aboria gifted a sub to Rachel Reeks. Thank you so much, Aboria. Very kind of you. Congrats. EK, you tried to apologize. Sorry, that's banned. Okay. Here are the increases on this announcement. Minsc Boo Timeless Heroes going from 0 to 1 point, added to the points list. Results are a 5-0. They need to be 5-0 in order for this to happen. When it comes to ending the game through fair, air quotes, means, Minsc Boo Timeless Heroes is the best in the business. Few other 4-drops can even compare when it comes to the amount of pressure, resilience, and flexibility provided by Minsc Boo. The competition is so tough that players will often adjust their mana bases to accommodate a splash, just to get a shot at resolving this dynamic duo. Even at the steep cost of 4 mana, Kappa, Minsc Boo is far too efficient at quickly ending games before any reasonable counterplay is available, and is flexible enough to do so in archetypes whose weaknesses typically stem from their inability to quickly close out games. Players looking for top-end cards to really pack a punch can still rely on Minsc Boo to do so. They just have to cough up the points to do so. Fuck. Just have to cough off the points. Rely on Minsc Boo. Let's just... There we go. All right. Minsc Boo Timeless Heroes. So this is a card that has been discussed for the points list for a year and a half. It's kind of a bullshit card. I think we all know that. This is admittedly one of the more interesting cards at one point, especially when it is alongside some of these other changes. Urza Saga is a big one that comes to mind. Psychic Frog and White Plume, also pretty big depending on the deck. But that's what we want. We want players to make decisions. We want players to potentially say, hey, why don't I just play all of these, right? Minsc Boo is just a powerhouse. This card is, I don't know what to say other than it is so it is such an unbelievable power outlier when it comes to a top end finisher, right? It is a card that you need the right answer at the right time, And if you don't have that, then you are going to have to deal with something that is effectively just worth the mana initially spent for Minsc Boo, right? Minsc Boo is like 8 mana worth of cards on one card that can, when one part of it is addressed, can then rebuild immediately. And if not addressed, their options are kill you this way or kill you this way. And while you can approach cards like this with the philosophy of, yeah, I resolved a multicolored 4-drop and got to untap with it, I deserve to win the game, that isn't a very healthy outlook on addressing some of these cards. I mentioned in here where Minsc Boo is too effective at quickly ending games. Yeah, it just comes down, kills people before any reasonable counterplay is available. Minsc Boo's counterplay, while it is a bit different from the counterplay for Psychic Frog, it suffers a lot of the same issues, where if you see people talking about how to deal with Psychic Frog, it often just dials into a very specific type of card, or in fact, often just dials into a specifically named card, right? Just have Caracas, just have Lightning Bolt or whatever. That's not a helpful way at approaching cards like this, right? We don't talk about, well, Baneslayer dies to Doomblade or whatever. And is flexible enough to do so in archetypes whose weaknesses typically stem from their inability to quickly close out games. Again, a lot of what this points list is addressing is saying that decks can't have it all. We are trying to reduce the amount of decks having it all and having it and always having it all, right? We have seen piles like check pile, or high roll decks like Naya, where they seemingly have it all because it's just an onslaught of these cards over and over again. You try to deal with one, you expend a bunch of resources to deal with one, and then they have the other. And that doesn't even factor in that these decks are often, packing their own kind of disruption, or their own disruption, their own protection, all that stuff. Yeah. Minsc Boo is a card where we just kind of want to see less of it. And when we see it, we want people to be paying the cost to do so. And this pointing, we believe, is one of those decision points that I talked about earlier, where there are going to be players that look at like Gruul monsters or Naya midrange, or they'll look at like I don't know, the like Scape Shift deck or Jeskai Green or Check Pile or whatever. And they may say like, oh yeah, you'd never play this in this deck. Right? Or, oh, well, your points are going to be exactly X, Y, and Z. Right? And you see this kind of approach within minutes of this discussion being posted, right? And that's just not accurate to the play experience of most players, right? That is not the case. There are going to be players that decide to go one way, players that decide to go the other way. There's going to be times in which they want to adjust this based on their metagame. You could be like a triple Mox Naya deck that now has to choose between White Plume Adventurer, Urza Saga, and Minsc Boo. And maybe you're like, well, I'm going to pick one of these. I'm not sure which one. I'm going to try out Saga for the first time and be like, oh, I kind of missed having like a way to really turbo out the initiative, or I missed having that big Haymaker card. Or maybe they play Ancient Tomb and they just say like, nope, all mana all the time, baby, doesn't matter. Like Broadside Bombardiers and Death Greeter Champion are just good enough, right? Or yeah, we'll get to Soul Ring. They decide whether or not they want their third Mox and want to play Soul Ring. Maybe they want to go down to 2 colors. Maybe we want to see a 3-color deck just try to play a 2-color deck, which can then lead to other decisions in their deck building. Check Pile, right? Like if they're on a triple box version of Check Pile, then it's like, do I want to play Psychic Frog? Do I want to play Minsc Boo? In some cases, players may say like, well, I'm never playing Minsc Boo in this Check Pile deck because I would just play Psychic Frog, or I would just play Treasure Cruise or whatever. And that's good. That's okay. Some people will want to play that. Some people will either want to go, Well, I'm on Ancestral plus Psychic Frog Minsc Boo because I have my 1 draw 7. If I draw it, I'm going to high roll you. But then I have Wingus and Dingus in the back here that, you know, when protected with Force of Will or whatever, it's going to be near unstoppable for my opponent to deal with. Minsc Boo being pointed is a points change that looks to push players to actually make decisions and to not have it all, and is a card that just kind of ends games without any real consideration to deck building, which is not what we want, right? Not what we want. Any questions, comments, and concerns for Minsc Boo? As I say, thank you to Halcyon Prime for the 2nd month. Welcome back. How you doing? How you been? Glad to have you. Good to see you. Gion E425 for the 3rd month. How you doing? How you been? Thank you so much. Glad to have you. Good to see you. What up? What up? And Dr. Petrichor for the 42nd month. Here's to more Canadian Highlander 2025, but also Urza Saga. Yeah, I got some decks to change. I got some decks to change here. Yeah, it can also be your commander. It's pretty good. There are some cool decisions to make. We are getting Gruul players to actually think. That's great. I love getting Gruul players to have to pick between Minsc Boo or Ancient Tomb or Strip Mine. These are 3 distinct decisions that they can make, that they are going to make dependent on their personal choices as a player, for other cards in their list, or their affinity towards certain strategies, or cards that their opponents are playing, cards in their metagame, right? And that creates diversity, and diversity is cool. All right. It's mostly people making jokes, so I'm going to skip to Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog is a great example of a must-answer self-perpetuating engine which demands it be the center of attention. If left unchecked, this powerful 2-drop can quickly take over a game and smother the opponent in evasive pressure and card advantage. There are simply too many non-games caused by Psychic Frog, and the number of reasonable answers are much more narrow than one would expect, especially outside of white and a handful of black spells. All this backed by a color pairing known for its disruption, Psychic Frog is too much of a matchup check to freely roam unpointed in Canadian Highlander. One comparison I would make to Psychic Frog, which is kind of an interesting one, is True Name Nemesis, where obviously True Name has its own niche and has its own playability. Doesn't draw you cards, but is a threat that certain archetypes just can't beat. And gets quite powerful when paired with other cards to reinforce that fact. Psychic Frog is that, but at 2 mana, and also just draws you cards, right? There are matchups where you can't fucking deal with Psychic Frog. I kind of talked about this in the intro here, where we have to address some of these proactive threats through the points list because we don't have a sideboard, and we don't have, it's not reasonable to address, it's not reasonable to just tell people to play well, you just need to play a shitload of more removal, right? It's like, that's not helpful. It really isn't. Yeah, it's Psychic Frog. I don't know if for folks that haven't played against this card, it is fucked up. It is unbelievably messed up. This card is broken. It's a mistake. If your mana base can accommodate playing it, you should play it, right? If you're like a blue-green deck that was splashing black for Deathrite Shaman, you should be splashing black for Psychic Frog. Card is unreal. Card is absolutely unreal. It's not the best example of, it's like Canadian Highlander is its own format. And so it's not the most helpful thing to just strictly compare it to other formats that are non-rotating. But you can look to other non-rotating formats for inspiration in your decks, but also as a meter of power level, right? And the fact that if you look at current modern tournament results, and you look at vintage tournament results, and you looked at Psychic Frog being banned from Legacy, I think you're going to find that, yeah, this card's pretty messed up no matter where it shows. No matter where it pops up, it's pretty disgusting. Yeah, basically, yep. It's Psychic Frog. Too much of a matchup check, way too snowbally, just a messed up magic card, too many non-games. Didn't even talk about the discard synergies that come paired with this card. Like it's an unreal magic card. Arguably one of the most unreal card on this list. Like, it is wild that this is a card that got printed. Any questions, comments, and concerns for Psychic Frog? Is there a world where Frog goes to 2? I don't know. Let's test it at 1. Pachow back for the 13th month. Murderpock to 3 points. Well, you cut the Sun Titan, so I'm going to have to point this. Point the deck until Sun Titan gets back in. Yeah, the Frog is pretty messed up. Yeah. Counterpoint Frog is cute. Yeah, card's messed up. Reanimate. Reanimate 5-0. This is one we chewed on for the longest time because we knew that we would be talking about Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog was one that is, at a glance, it's the kind of pointing that if you are not, completely dialed into the format, you might go like, really? Psychic Frog? Huh. I didn't even know he was sick. But Reanimate, and obviously Reanimate pairs very well with Psychic Frog. But let's run this down. Reanimator has been a top tier strategy in Canadian Highlander since the creation of the format, and the namesake card has mostly been known for resurrecting massive game-ending threats at a very low cost. While all of this remains true in 2025, game-ending threats now cost much less than they used to, and creature combo strategies are more streamlined than ever, often owing their success to how effectively they utilize the graveyard. The amount of flexibility provided by Reanimate, paired with the Reanimator archetype being the recipient of many recent printing and beneficial points changes, have led the council to making a more targeted pointing than some of the others featured in this announcement. So Reanimate is one where, again, it's something that I couldn't quite get the wording I wanted to for this announcement, but there are some specifics here that led us to Reanimator getting pointed. Yeah, Reanimator, always been a top tier deck in the format. It is, God, I forget if Robin, if you're still in chat, I remember you had an anecdote about Reanimator where it's like, Reanimator is always the best deck in the room or some shit. Reanimator always loses to itself. Like the only bad matchup for Reanimator is like Scoos in itself or whatever. And that's true. It's like Reanimator is just a messed up archetype where it is kind of a matchup check, right? A matchup check in a format without sideboards. It's one of the big reasons why you see every deck packing multiple pieces of graveyard hate or accepting their death from, if they're not playing it, right? It's been known for resurrecting game-ending threats at a very low cost, and this remains true. Game-ending threats now cost much less than they used to. So, yeah, like, Reanimate as a fair card, Reanimate as the most flexible unearth possible, has really seen a rise in play over the past 5 years. Reanimate was played outside of Reanimator decks before then, but it wasn't as widespread of a feature, right? It really picked up when cards like Palace Jailer were printed, cards like Leovold or Spellseeker, because stealing your opponent's copy of that, or your opponent having to deal with the first copy of this card only to then reintroduce it to the game, was huge. And the same can kind of be said for nowadays, right? Like, yeah, reanimating Archon of Cruelty or, I don't know, Valgavoth or Gristlebrand, still incredibly good, very powerful, very strong, terrifying to deal with. It's one of the bigger issues, though, is reanimating, I don't know, Broadside Bombardiers, Barrel Gwaif, Psychic Frog, White Plume Adventurer, Spellseeker, Nadu. Like, the fact that this card has hit peak flexibility for play is terrifying. Solitude or Fury, yeah, great examples, right? Like, it has just hit this level of, this is no longer a card that you play because you are dedicated to filling up your graveyard, that you're dedicated to stealing up cards from the opponent's graveyard. It's a card that sees play, it does all that, but then it also sees play going, oh, you used so many resources trying to get rid of my Psychic Frog, or I used so few resources trying to Fury your board or Solitude your big threat or whatever. I'm going to then do it again at 1 mana. The life loss, of course it's a thing, but 1 mana. 1 mana. Yes, the fact that control decks are running Reanimate, the fact that mid-range blue decks are all in on Reanimate, not all in, but play Reanimate, like no questions asked, is probably a sign that this card is maybe doing something a little too efficiently. Excuse me. And a little too, it's just too effective. It just plays into the snowballing nature of the format, right? And it doesn't have, Reanimate doesn't have the restrictions that something like Unearth or Helping Hand would have. Obviously, cheaper than Animate Dead, doesn't have the same kind of counterplay as something like Animate or Dance of the Dead. It's, yeah, it's pretty messed up. It's 1 mana. That's another thing. The wording for here, where creature combo strategies are more streamlined than ever, often owing their success to how effectively they utilize the graveyard. Creature combos in a weird spot, has been for a while. It's still a totally reasonable thing to sleeve up, despite the abundance of cards like Fury or Brotherhood's End, or Toxic Deluge is a weird one to mention here. But yeah, creature combo is still a thing you can do. It is still a reasonable thing to bring to a competitive setting. But it's one of these things where, like, think about how good every other deck has become, right? Creature combo is up there with it. It's just a lot of the tools that other decks have received, specifically mid-range decks and control decks have received, are just like the best tools they have received are just so good against the creature combo decks. But look at the kind of cards that creature combo has received in like the past 5 years. Finale of Devastation, Neoform. Look at the cards that have been Birthing Ritual. Look at the cards that have been pointed, or the points changes that have benefited creature combo. Stuff like Birthing Pod getting removed. Even like Demonic Tutor getting reduced, Natural Order going down, Spellseeker going down previously, like a Time Walk going down. Just a bunch of changes have been made that has made creature combo, when not interrupted, is as efficient as it's ever been. And a lot of that is owed to the fact that they can put cards into their graveyard and reanimate them. That they can set up lines where, oh, this card got, my Surveil land put my fucking Spellseeker or Nadu in the graveyard. Great, I'm off to the races because I have a Reanimate. Or Spellseeker having the flexibility of finding Reanimates. Well, now I can reanimate this. Right? So creature combo has been getting quite a bit better, even though it feels bad because you run into a Fury and whatnot, and it's bad news. Yes, and cards like Survival of the Fittest. So creature combo more streamlined than ever because it's using the graveyard, and because of all the new tools that creature combo has gotten over the years. But also, so this is Reanimate is a targeted pointing, but also a shifting, right? We'll cover this when we get to the points decreases. But there is kind of a shift in like, okay, well, I'm fine if people Survival the Fittest. I'm even fine if they Spellseeker. But the redundancy provided from Reanimate is just too much. And Reanimate's ability to let those decks play a mid-range game is just, it's not that kind of mid-range game, right? Not that kind of mid-range game. Also, Reanimator as an archetype getting a whole bunch of love, right? We decreased Mystical Tutor down to 1. Demonic Tutor went down to 3. We received Surveil lands. We got the 2 best reanimation targets of all time, basically. You got Psychic Frog, like Emperor of Bones. I mean, Emperor of Bones getting printed is like both a benefit and a bit of a whoopsie against Reanimator, but you know, it's Emperor of Bones. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's Reanimator's gotten quite strong. Always an awkward matchup check. Reanimate just allows for a bit too much. It's a bit too much of a problem even outside of the Reanimator decks. Because it's hard enough to deal with their Psychic Frog or their Broadside Bombardiers or their Barrelgoyf one time. Now I have to deal with it a second time, and it's over, right? Reanimate, pretty good magic card. Best reanimation target aside from Atraxa, Archon of Cruelty. With a big asterisk. Because there are some other good cards too. Yeah, Valgavoth, pretty great. Can't Caracas that. Can't Caracas Archon, but you can also persist Archon and unmarked Grave Archon, which is pretty nice. God. Even like Lord of Change, you know, not a big selling, not the one that I'm going to like slap on this announcement of like Reanimate's so fucked up. How do you beat Lord of Change? And the answer is like, well, you still don't. But, you know, it's not what I would label as the poster child of this kind of archetype. All right. Here we go. Urza's Saga. Inarguably, the most ubiquitous card featured in this announcement. Urza Saga has long been deemed powerful enough to be a pointed card, but never made the list due to its effectiveness against the dominant blue strategies. Over time, this sentiment has changed, where Urza Saga has shown to be incredibly effective against any player sitting across the table from you. Whether it be the reinvigoration of older targets through the printing of Nadu Winged Wisdom, such as Shuko, such as just, I mean, it's weird to say that this is a downside when I just talked about how brutal Reanimator is, but being able to find some of the most fucked up graveyard hate you've seen. And various combo enablers, obviously being able to find Voltaic Key and Manifold Key is pretty strong. Or current design trends making Moxen better than they've ever been. Urza Saga has only been getting stronger as time goes on. So while the council does acknowledge the benefits of having a card like Saga prey on blue strategies at such a low cost of inclusion, we believe an unpointed Urza Saga does more overall harm than good to the health and diversity of the format. Usually I don't like to kind of interject, but let's break it down. Inarguably the most ubiquitous card featured in this announcement, Urza Saga is just fucking everywhere. It's just everywhere, right? That's not great. This card is pretty fucked up. If you haven't noticed, there is counterplay, right? It is an enchantment. It is a land. Wasteland's free. You can play your Beseiju. You can prismatic ending it. All this stuff, but it's a land. The cost of inclusion of lands is fucking nothing, right? Like Ancient Tomb's a great example. Strip's a great example. March, not prismatic ending. I was trying to be whimsical. It's everywhere. Urza Saga is everywhere. And we have known that this card is messed up, right? Like, we're not, it has never been a discussion of power level. Urza Saga is undeniably a fucked up magic card, right? And incredibly powerful in format with Moxen and with cheap artifacts. Nobody's debating that. The contention was that, yeah, it's messed up, but is it messed up and doing good for the format, right? Is it messed up, but also providing some counterplay to blue decks, right? Being able to like slide underneath their counter spells, being able to let combo decks actually play to the board a little bit, providing a recovery tool, right, for a lot of archetypes. One thing that I've said previously is that people wanted Urza Saga pointed because it lets players who have mulliganed win the game. There is a general vibe in Magic the Gathering, but especially with a format like Canadian Highlander, especially among competitive players, but anytime your opponent mulligans, you fucking cheer. Anytime my opponent mulligans, great. I feel fantastic. If they mulligan a lot, there is a feeling of, well, I deserve to win the game. They mulliganed to 5. I kept a 7-card hand. I should win this game, right? And Urza Saga let the players mulligan aggressively, or even just mulligan incidentally, and still be able to participate in the game, and do so in a way that could invalidate a large collection of cards in the opponent's hand, effectively forcing them to mulligan, or just like you're taking these game actions that you can't interact with in any way possible, right? And some of that is good. Some of that is true. But over time, there's just too much Urza Saga. So, card is incredibly powerful. Card is incredibly powerful and everywhere. And when it hits the table, the game is now about this Urza Saga. You got to respect the Urza Saga. What, are you going to ignore it? They're going to find their utility card. They're going to poop out all these constructs. Sometimes you can try to trade and attrition your way through an Urza Saga. But all this at the cost of your opponent playing a land. So that's not great. And again, giving a nod to Nadu, as is the Reanimate. Nadu, a card absent from this pointing. A card that we did talk about, but I'll get to the end. Nadu is something that we wanted to see if addressing these other cards that show up in Nadu decks to give Nadu decks more flexibility in how they, develop their board. I develop my Nadu, my opponent tries to fight over it or does some stuff and finally gets rid of it. And then I just get it back and they're crushed under this. I get to Saga my way into a Shuko. They have to deal with these constructs. And if they don't, they die to them. And if they do, they die to my Nadu. I'm a Nadu deck, but now I have the initiative on turn 2. Please respond. Like, now you have to play out to the board to try and crush me. But in doing so, you're not keeping up disruption. You're not being able to interact with my board, my Nadu, my game plan, or whatever, right? So this is something where, yes, Saga is a bit of a nod towards Nadu. Nadu is something that we talked about a bit, but not enough for me to put it down below in the other cards that we talked about, because we don't want to have people run wild in their expectations. But obviously, Urza Saga is a card that is pointed with us thinking about Nadu. Also thinking about Moxen. I've talked about Moxen a bit. I'll talk about Moxen more. But yeah, obviously pretty fucked up with Moxen for a variety of reasons. So while we believe that this card does provide a nice counter to certain blue strategies like Jeskai or Check Pile, it ends up doing more harm than good. And the decks and strategies that are willing to pay the points for Urza Saga are still going to be able to have that tool as a way to deal with Check Pile or Jeskai. Specifically, maybe the list of Check Pile that decide to play less to the board, right? Here's the cool thing where the new points changes interacts, where you have somebody who goes, I'm not playing Psychic Frog. I'm not playing Minsc Boo or Reanimate. I'm going in Ancestral Recall, Treasure Cruise, and Mana Drain. Or, they're playing this like very traditional cards in hand kind of build. And then you have Urza Saga because you are like, I know this player is going to be doing that, or I'm more scared of when these decks take that route. So I'm going to place Urza Saga in my deck to be able to deal with these. That's cool. That's decisions. We are making people, we are getting people to make decisions. Also, subtle nod to, Time Vault decks and Academy decks and whatnot. Because as much as I love them, letting them have their cake and eat it too is a bit much. Remember, this card, we talked about this card finding Shuko and finding Soul Guide Lantern and Moxen and, Shadow Spear. But this card finds Black Lotus. This card finds Black Lotus. That's pretty fucking good. We also have a blurb here from Counselor Evan Pepper. Urza Saga has found another home as a focal point in a combo deck, not a variance, after having already been in one of the previously well-performing deck, Time Vault. Beyond searching for specific combo pieces within these decks, Shuko and Voltaic Key respectively, Urza Saga has also allowed these combo decks, as well as other decks and archetypes, the ability to pivot to mid-range plants or silver bullets too effectively. Urza Saga is a low barrier to play non-basic land, meaning its low floor has likely led to it being overrepresented or a card that is overplayed in the format. However, it is consistently proven to be an effective tool at fighting blue decks, which have appeared in great numbers across multiple metagames, so it'll likely continue to see substantial play. Yeah, this card is still going to see a lot of points, or a lot of play at one point. That's fine. You just got to pay. You got to pay the toll. Any questions, comments, concerns about Urza Saga? Urza Saga has been probably the card most discussed for pointing out of anything here. Psychic Frog is close, but Psychic Frog, it has recency bias. Believe it or not, we've had like 2 years with Urza Saga. We've had more than 2 years. We've had like 2.5 years with Urza Saga. And people have been talking about Saga going to 1 for about 2.5 years. It's it's the card that is I would imagine most people are excited for, other than Psychic Frog, or maybe even the following one, which is a very interesting card to point, and a very interesting discussion to have. White Plume Adventurer. White Plume Adventurer. White Plume Adventurer. Let me take a drink here. Yeah, how come Psychotog isn't pointed? Where's Psychotog? Oh, big stretch. Modern Horizons, wait, it came out 4 years. No, fuck off. 3.5. Give me 3.5. Jesus Christ. Why did I think it came out in 2022? Is it time for Gorilla Shaman to see play again? Ooh, maybe. White Plume Adventurer. Since its printing in 2023, the initiative has been a topic of heated contention among Canadian Highlander players, with some of the more vocal proponents asking for action to be taken as early as the first year of printing. Realistically, this should say first month of printing. The council tends to take a more deliberate approach when pointing cards, allowing them to settle before any action is taken, and this is an even more difficult task when addressing a mechanic as a whole. While there are certainly outliers in power level across the collection of initiative cards, the council would like to tackle the speed in which the initiative is introduced to the game by pointing White Plume Adventurer. White Plume Adventurer is uniquely cheap among initiative cards, and when backed by acceleration, it can warp the entire game around engaging with the initiative or hoping to avoid it entirely. So while it may not close games single-handedly the way Seasoned Dungeoneer can, the council feels that quickly introducing the initiative should be reserved for players looking to commit points into doing so. White Plume Adventure. The initiative. People talk about it all the time. It has thankfully lost some speed in terms of people just like not wanting to see it. I mean, I'm not super happy when my opponent plays the initiative or takes the initiative. It does feel pretty bad, but it has died down from the, like, this came out in 2023, right? Now I'm second guessing myself. Because since printing, we have had very vocal players say something akin to, you got to get rid of the initiative. You got to ban the initiative. You got to just get rid of it, right? You got to point every initiative card. You've got to point multiple initiative cards. Some way, shape, or form that covers that. And that's a little extreme to do so. Sorry, real quickly. Cross X Hunter. Yes, there's going to be a non-Discord post. There were some issues with getting into the actual website itself, but it will be put on the website. I'm just not going to update it while I'm talking here. So more or less, just wait until after the stream, and then it'll be up there. Players have been asking for the initiative to be addressed for quite some time. And it has been a topic of discussion ever since that duration, right? We have decided that, it's an awkward one because the initiative cards kind of go in and out of play. They are the kind of cards that, because of the nature of Canlander players or just Magic players in general, if Jeskai cuts White Plume Adventurer or Seasoned Dungeoneer, or if one Jeskai pilot that's winning events does so, then other Jeskai pilots are going to do so. But it's not going to be everyone, and then people make these definitive decisions about these things happening, or if this archetype, if Death and Taxes is dead or whatever, despite despite looking at the winning archetypes over 2024 and Death and Taxes or White X Thalia decks, White Plume decks, having a bit of a resurgence, Magic players are going to Magic player. They're going to look at the information they want to look at. And so it's a little tough to deal with a card like this because despite the fact that this is a knock against the Thalia decks and the Ancient Tomb decks, it's a knock against some of the creature combo decks, the mid-range decks, the Moxen strategies, as well as builds of Jeskai or Jeskai Black, or 4-color Jeskai, like Jeskai Green. It's hard to nail down. So the issue with White Plume, the issue with addressing the initiative for the longest time is basically a confluence of things. Is that there are... it pops up in places and then disappears and then comes back and then disappears. And then sometimes players will play one, like a different one, like Jeskai pilots for a while were playing Seasoned Dungeoneer more than White Plume Adventurer, right? There are, blue-white X decks like Esper decks that were not playing White Plume Adventurer for a while because they didn't want to potentially, introduce it and get got. And that's not justification. And the fact that this card doesn't always show up is not justification to avoid pointing it, because of course it's not going to always show up. Players will make decisions for a variety of reasons, right? The main goal for a lot of players isn't just to win as much as possible, right? If we wanted to do that, everybody would be playing Time Vault Kappa. And so what we are looking to do as a council with this change is address the speed in which the initiative is introduced, right? The biggest issue with the initiative, we're not blanket banning the initiative or anything. The biggest issue the players have with the initiative is often they can't address it or deal with it in a timely manner. And White Plume is a power outlier at that. It is 3 mana. At 3 mana, it means that White Plume Adventurer can easily hit the table on turn 2. Sometimes even turn 1 with enough Moxen. But off of Moxen and Mana Dork or Ancient Tomb, or Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, whatever you want to throw in there, this card can hit the table quicker than other initiative cards. And that's not great. That's not great. The speed in which the initiative is introduced and the the pacing for which there's reasonable counterplay is something we are looking to hit, while also hitting some players that are free rolling this in versions of Jeskai or Jeskai Black, and to kind of say like, hey, hold on, these people have realized that you should just get real degenerate and play out these cheap efficient cards in the Thalia decks and the Urza Saga decks or whatever. Yeah. that was a messier explanation than some of the other ones. I will say this. I'm not making any promises. I'm not saying this as the voice of the council in its entirety here. This is why it wasn't written up here. There could, the world where a number of initiative creatures are on the points list is one way to approach dealing with the initiative, right? Like, it's not like we've been ignoring the initiative this entire time. So there have been discussions both within the council and, like on the Discord about addressing the initiative. If we are addressing the initiative as a whole, would involve, maybe putting a point on the rare cycle of initiative creatures. Like the standouts, right? The Caves of Chaos Adventurer and Seasoned Dungeoneer and Undermountain Adventurer. Maybe not throwing points on Passageway Seer or Ravenloft Adventurer. Definitely not on Tomb of Horrors Adventurer. But like, that is an approach that can be done if the initiative continued to prove itself to be a problem. And I'm older. Continued to be a problem and continued to be ubiquitous. But if you look at tournament results for Canadian Highlander over the past year, the amount of dedicated initiative decks, tiny. Like, I think there's like two. Two dedicated initiative decks have shown up and received, higher tournament results, which seems like it's an argument against pointing the initiative cards. But we're not worried about the decks that are going all in on the initiative, and decks that are going all in on the initiative are going to still want to play White Plume Adventurer, right? They're still going to do that. And it doesn't really matter what they're doing because their deck is all speed, all initiative. That's it, right? We are just trying to deal with this card showing up as like an afterthought that then warps the entirety of the game around addressing this card. And I think that Pointing White Plume does that. That may lead to a hell of a lot less White Plume in places where, like, yeah, I don't think Jeskai or Jeskai Black needs this card. Maybe these Nadu decks don't need to introduce the initiative so early. Maybe these Mardu decks need to not have fucking everything that, kills you in Vintage Cube. But I know that in talking to a lot of these, I'm going to say shitter decks, talking to players that win, that have quite a bit of tournament success with the White Plume, Urza Saga, Thalia style decks, about this change, they're still happily playing White Plume Adventurer in their point spread and are bending their point spread to find a way to accommodate Urza Saga and White Plume Adventurer. I was talking to Canadian Highlander year-end championship winner Jack, dedicated Death and Taxes White X Thalia Shitters deck pilot, about these changes, and he said these just the most beautiful words that I could ever have hoped to have heard about these changes. You know what he told me? I'm just going to cut mocks. Oh, it's so soothing. Like, he's just like, oh yeah, Urza Saga and White Plume? Yeah, I'm just cutting mocks. Soul Ring got decreased, so yeah, you could just be on like Ring Crypt. You could be on Ring Crypt, Saga White Plume, that seems kind of fucked up. You could be on Ring, Mox, White Plume Saga Strip. That's kind of fucked up. Yeah, that was music to my ears. Music to my ears. The year-end champs are going to be on Sunday, January 26th, broadcast by Loading Ready Run, featuring commentary, including myself and the return of Trenton McIntyre. Also, potentially some additional people coming in too. No, I'm not. I tried to make a run. I mean, I say that, but if I had gone runner at the year end, at the end of the year, for tournament dubs, I would have just sat out because I would prefer to put on a good show. I got producer brain, not player brain. If I scrub out round 1, will you have me do color commentary? If you scrub out, sorry, hold on. Your wording's a little off, Spencer. When you scrub out round 1, as long as you promise to not say the things that have led you to being banned from coming close to schoolyards, then absolutely. You can more than happy to have you on camera and on mic there. Be Booker in the TNA match, call it while playing it. Oh, that's a fucking good match. You ever watch who is it? Chet Lemon and what did he call himself? Black Snow, White Snow. When Booker T is doing commentary under a pseudonym and he like just gets up, takes off the mic, and people are like, "Oh my god, it's Booker T!" It's Booker T. Yeah, Black Snow and Chet Lemon. that fucking, it's so good. It's so good. No, it was Nash, right? It was so good. It was so good. All right. Any questions on White Plume Adventurer? Yeah, Kevin Nash's fake name. Yeah, Chet Lemon and Black Snow. Any comments, questions, concerns on White Plume Adventurer? I know I was a little more scattered with this one. Talking for 2 hours straight will do that to you. Yes, Baldur's Gate came out in 2022. Thank you. We got it. We nailed it. Yeah, White Plume is fucked. This card is unreal. Like, obviously, this isn't relevant to our format, but for those that don't play Vintage, while it's not entirely White Plume Adventure, Orcish Bowmasters also plays a very large part, and Luris and Psychic Frog and whatnot, but Mono White Initiative is so popular online and White Plume Adventure is so fucked up that Still Moon Cavalier is now a regularly seen Vintage card. This idiot. Like, to provide context on power level, this card, a 3-mana Eventide rare, just sees regular play, multiple copies in your archetypes because of the power level of decks, partly because of White Plume Adventurer. That's wild. Okay, let's talk about the decreases. So these are cards that have had their points decreased. This is also the only, we're going to kick it off with the only card that was neither added nor removed from the points list, just an adjustment of its points. Soul Ring. So Soul Ring could have changed, for what it's worth. This is where the voting counts. Soul Ring could have changed without a unanimous vote because it is not a card that is being added or removed, but it did receive a unanimous vote. And I imagine if we were not unanimous on Soul Ring, it would not have received a vote. We would have not brought it to vote because, again, we are really trying to showcase a unified council here working together to kick off the new year. We spent a lot of fucking time talking about these cards, and we wanted to be damn sure of what we were doing. Yes, Mulder, I hear you. She's very excited about the points changes. While Sol Ring can certainly go pound for pound with Moxen in terms of power level, it has lost some presence in the format as players favor 3-colored and 4-colored mid-range archetypes. While Sol Ring still has a home in monocolored proactive archetypes, such as Death and Taxes or Tiberian Academy deck lists, those archetypes are incidentally taking some splash damage this announcement with the pointing of Urza's Saga. In an effort to preserve those archetypes, while also providing some well-needed stimulus towards 2-color shells, the Council is reducing Sol Ring to 3 points from 4. I didn't mention it in this, but it is worth noting that Sol Ring has always had this interesting tension with Demonic Tutor in our format. Much like the pillars of Moxen or other pieces of Power 9, we have seen like Sol Ring and Demonic Tutor kind of stay at parity, if you will. This shifted when Demonic Tutor went down to 3 points. And because Demonic Tutor went down to 3, it didn't necessarily mean Sol Ring was going down to 3, but it is kind of it is interesting how they have kind of played as indicators for the power level of each of those. Anyway, Sol Ring, really, really good Magic card. I don't know if you've ever played this card, but it is a really messed up Magic card. And we did take into consideration, like, is it better that we're seeing more people play Sol Ring than not? Oh, thank you. You can just... Thank you. Is it better that we have more people playing Sol Ring than not with this? It's like, good is a... good is an interesting term to use. It is a change that is going to be very important in impacting decisions regarding Moxen or other additional 1-point cards down the line. Because and doing so while hopefully getting players to move away from a triple Mox point spread or get away from from constantly jamming 3-color decks. We're not trying to remove 3-color and 4-color decks away from the game, but we are trying to take certain 4-color decks that could probably be 3 and certain 3-color decks that could probably be 2. We're trying to incentivize players to reduce the number of colors in their deck, to want to play these slam dunk threats that are not too pip intensive. And while fast Sol Ring can lead to some pretty busted starts, much like the Moxen, much like Mana Crypt, it is also a card of the people. It is a card that is very popular for players. It is very appealing for players. It is a card that when we put it out there as a reduction, players are likely going to flock to it, even if it isn't necessarily the best thing for their decks. That's okay, because that creates diversity in their point spreads, as well as diversity in their non-pointed cards. Reducing the points on Sol Ring is less of a deck build. I mean, it is both of these things, but it is less of a deck building consideration and more of a gameplay consideration, if that makes sense, right? Like, yes, a cheaper Sol Ring, meaning more people are going to play Sol Ring, means that there are going to be people having, thinking about how they build their deck. But also the kind of cards that benefit from playing Sol Ring and the kind of cards people are going to gravitate towards in their Sol Ring deck changes the texture of gameplay, right? It may lead to more Planeswalkers seeing play. It may lead to more double pipped or single pipped 4-drops seeing play. It may lead to players opting to, I don't know, include more basic lands in their deck and go towards playing Blood Moons and friends. It may encourage more players to play like stompy decks, right? And I think that is pretty cool and pretty good. Highlander is often at its best when players are taking game actions on their own turn, and when they are making decisions about which game actions they want to play, and when the game actions they are taking differentiate from the game actions their opponents are taking. And we feel that Soul Ring going to 3 is one of those changes that will help those, right? Yeah. Any questions, comments, concerns for Soul Ring? I was admittedly a little low. I was lower on Soul Ring to 3 than most people. I'm always very hesitant when it comes to fast mana. But there are fewer change. Like I can't think of any other card on this list that has me excited to play decks that are inevitably going to go 3-1 at my local tournament than Soul Ring. Like Mazen Golfer hits the nail on the head here, where green white little kid with Soul Ring, Emerald, Pearl, Urza Saga. Well, maybe I play Saga, maybe I play White Plume Adventurer. I don't know. I've got options. I can do whatever, and that's kind of dope. Maybe I go green white and I play Ring, Crypt, White Plume, Saga. That's pretty exciting to me. Maybe there are versions of Hoof, an archetype that can still take down an event, but has really lost points with the abundance of decks like Jeskai, and the decks like Check Pile. Obviously, Fury and Pyrokinesis, pretty bad news for Hoof. Despite the fact that Natural Order is now 1 point, Crop Rotation is 0 points. I think I'm forgetting something. There are some other cards that could go with that, but just playing Hoof, playing green X like creature decks, Gaia's Cradle decks, very cool, very cool. Glad to have it. The Frog Hemoth meta. Schmedium Green. Ooh, Schmedium Green playing Crypt, Ring, Strip, Saga. That's kind of spicy. Or Crypt, Ring, Saga, and then Minsc Boo on the splash is pretty nice. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Oh yeah, Tomb would be good. Crypt, Ring, Tomb, Strip, Crypt, Ring, Tomb, Saga. See? This is what we want. We want people to be thinking about the different point spreads that they could play. That's exciting. That creates conversation. That gets people invested and excited about the format. And it creates diversity in point spreads and gameplay. Texture. Spellseeker. Or I guess any questions on Soul Ring before we move to Spellseeker? Also, somebody mentioned pointing fetch lands. Never going to happen for a couple of reasons. One, we want players to be able to cast their spells. We want players to be able to build reasonable mana bases to cast their spells. And tacking on 10 cards to the points list is not exactly what we want to do. We're not a fan of blanket pointing. And also, they just don't see play then. Like, it is not exciting to have to spend points on fetch lands. That does not spark joy. That does not get people interested in playing Highlander, and does not get people interested in exploring the different things they can do in Highlander, because you can't do different things because your mana is dog shit. Another level-headed take? Damn. Caracas point tonight? Nope. I don't know if I'll have time to talk about Caracas, but for what it's worth, we are recording an episode of North 100 after this stream. I have to go record an episode of North 100 where we are running down the points changes, and we are going to have a very large section on why Caracas is not getting pointed. And for what it's worth, from my perspective, I love free Caracas. And I think people are misguided. You know why? You don't hate Caracas. You just don't like that Modern Magic can't play Brimaz anymore. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but even with Caracas at one point, you're not playing Brimaz. You're not playing Brimaz. I know, babes. I know. I've racked up so many wins with this bad boy. You look at all my Jeskai lists from like 2016, 2015. It's Brimaz all the way down. I legitimately would play 2 basic planes in my deck so I could tithe for them against Blood Moon and back to basic strategies to resolve Brimaz. I get it. I get it. I'm gonna... Yeah, Mulder.
And that's no regular monkey. His name's Wheeler. He's a trained duelist.
Apotheosis, thank you for the 100 bits. Here's to you finally getting your man/hamster. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you're doing well. Glad to have you, Mesa. Good to see you. Very kind of you. Spellseeker. Despite being the namesake of an entire archetype, Spellseeker is rarely worthy of the reputation it has received caused by its turbulent history on the points list. While certain archetypes that would benefit from an unpointed Spellseeker are not ones the Council is actively seeking to improve, such as Reanimator, Nadu Seeker Walk, and Ancestral Recall strategies, to name a few, the Council believes that there are other targets worth addressing first, such as Reanimate and 4th Aerolingus. The Council also believes that removing Spellseeker is one of the safer ways to provide some additional improvements for highly pointed combo strategies, such as Flash and Thoracle combo. Spellseeker card's not great. It's wild to have a card that is effectively a 1-card combo when you have 6 mana. It's wild to have this card and be like, yeah, it just doesn't hit, you know? It just really doesn't hit. Spellseeker is kind of getting the same treatment that Merchant Scroll received, where Merchant Scroll was stuck at 1 forever, and we're like, well, Ancestral Recall is just too good. We can't let people free Merchant Scroll, and there's no way Ancestral Recall is going to be more than 7 points. And then Ancestral Recall is 8 points. And people are like, oh, okay. And then High Tide players fucking losing their mind. Thoracle players or Flash Hulk players also very happy, you know. So Seeker Walk or Spellseeker is kind of like a shift in points, right? We mentioned this here where Spellseeker has gotten a lot of has had a turbulent history on the points list. It has gone up, it's gone down. It was very quickly added to the points list. It's got a whole archetype based off of it. Spellseeker and Seeker Walk decks have been the reasoning behind certain cards being added to the points list that have now been removed, such as Umezawa's Jite. And it has also just been a card that has stopped us from taking other decisions, right? It's been a card that we have, we just aren't dealing with it. We aren't dealing with other things because we're like, well, Spellseeker's pointed. They can't play Spellseeker, so that's one less tutor for them to have or whatever. But it's 2025, and I think a 3-mana tutor here that is totally fine as long as we address the cards that it is primarily finding, right? Like, and that's why there's a call out to something like Reanimate and 4th Aerolingus, because giving a free Spellseeker does let Reanimator play a card that can find Reanimate. Lets Reanimator play a card that can find a counterspell for protection or hand attack or entomb or whatever, right? Spellseeker and Reanimator, really good. Obviously, in a Seeker Walk deck or a Nadu deck, pretty good. This lets, Nadu decks have some flexibility in what kind of build they're going to be playing, right? Am I playing a hybridized Nadu Seeker Walk deck, and now maybe getting a free Spellseeker is the push to get them to make that decision. Maybe not necessarily something we want to do. But again, is that an issue with Spellseeker, or is that maybe an issue with something like Urza Saga or something like Nadu? Was that an issue with Reanimate? Spellseeker? Was that an issue with Reanimate being too good and being able to reanimate your tutor to find other pieces of protection, maybe a bit too flexible and too strong? Ancestral Recall decks. Like, yeah, how terrified are we of a deck paying 3 mana at sorcery speed to find Ancestral Recall? Or are we a little worried about the fact that this card can now find a kill spell with Fourth Aerlingus? Or are we, is it that big of a deal if this card can find Recall, Lightning Bolt, or Swords to Plowshares, right? Spellseeker is not a bad card, but it is a card that it's weird how mid this card is when you play it on curve, and how good this card is once the dust settles, right? And that is kind of what we're looking to do, right? We are more worried about the first 4 turns of a game than we are about anything beyond that. Because if players can play Magic the Gathering in the first 4 turns, then they will consider it a good game, right? Think about all the times you've talked to players and you're like, that was a good game. We had an actual game. We had an actual match. And then try to recall what those actual game actions were. Sometimes they were kind of just dog shit. Just people throwing cards at each other, top decking or whatever. But because you got to a later turn, it was a good game. You got to do things. And that's because people got to take game actions that actually mattered and potentially have counterplay within the first couple of turns. And so anything beyond that is great. And Spellseeker, a card not as good in the first couple of turns, because, look, if you don't have a way to check this 1/1 or the Time Walk that's coming or the Ephemerate or whatever, then, I mean, that's kind of on you. It's not really a matchup check in this case. It's more of a whether or not you're going to respect your opponent going off or understand what the combo is and all that. Yeah, we're not concerned about that. Also, an added benefit, as I mentioned, the council also believes that removing Spellseeker is one of the safer ways to provide some additional improvements for highly pointed combo strategies such as Flash and Thoracle combo. Flash and Thoracle are... Yes, I hear you, Mulder. Flash and Thoracle are a bit awkward because they seem to fluctuate between being unplayable and the best thing to do in the format. And to just be this goldfish end the game, you don't have a say in what's going on. Spellseeker is one of the safer ways to provide some additional points for those decks, because right now they're kind of in gay baby jail. They're just not going anywhere, right? And while these type of combo decks tend to elicit a more invested response of like emotional response of fuck, I hate playing against Flash, or God, I hate it when they Thoracle and I feel like I didn't play, or whatever. Spellseeker is a way to provide benefits to those decks through, I'm going to use this word again, textured gameplay. Ooh. But also for those decks, you get to play this card without the worry of Reanimate, because there are spots where like the Thoracle deck can make Reanimator piles with Reanimate. There are decks where the Flash Hulk can set up the pieces with like Buried Alive or whatever, reanimate the Hulk and Cabal Therapy. There's a bunch of different ways that they can go about doing it. So these decks are getting a tool that can help find their namesakes, but they are also losing some of the flexibility for being able to play a different game plan off of like Reanimate or Psychic Frog or whatever. Gotta make sure I'm not gonna roll over my cat. Great. Any questions, comments, concerns on Spellseeker? Great. I mean, I should probably give it one more second. Have some water. Spellseeker being free makes me want to bring combo this week, which is so exciting. Yeah, that's another thing too, right? Like, Spellseeker is a champion of bad combo as well. Like, pretty, It has a role with the creature combo lists, finding Time Walk and all that. But Spellseeker and Survival of the Fittest, when we get to it, are champions of, oh my god, I can finally play blank. Whether or not that is true is obviously up to the beholder, up to the player. But what's important is that it makes people want to do that, right? It's not, it sounds cruel and a little condescending, but this is how a lot of changes are made for formats, even formats beyond Highlander, right? This is how changes are made for formats like Legacy or for the Modern or for Commander or whatever. It's more so about it's more so about making people think that more options are available and that their decisions matter more than they actually do. Because ultimately, we're just making small changes. They're just small little changes here and there. Your deck isn't make or break off one single card, and if it is, then you got some other issues. You're playing Citadel Storm. Kappa. A good example for this is when the recent bannings happened in Modern, and somebody posted a screenshot of them dying to Boros Energy, and they had a Risen Reef in play. For those that don't know what Risen Reef is, it's a 3-mana 1/1 that ETBs or another elemental ETBs. Look at the top card of your deck. If it's a land, it gets put into play tapped, and if you don't, it goes into your hand, right? Yes, respect the cat. Yeah. And they got clowned on. You know, I'm not here to talk about whether or not the clowning was deserved, but the fact that changes were made that pushed players to want to go and play a 3-mana 1/1 like elvish visionary like wood elves kind of thing in a format like Modern is dope. That is the goal. Even if they aren't necessarily making changes that'll have a massive sweeping impact on the best things in the format or whatever, it's driving players to play crap like this, or to go outside the box, or to have a reinvigorated interest in something that they're passionate about, right? Like Spellseeker getting down. I guarantee if you look at the Highlander Discord or the forums, there are people cheering about playing High Tide. There are people cheering about playing like old school Rug Kiki Pod with Time Walk. There are folks obviously excited for Flash, excited for Thoracle. Like, these players are out there. People for World Gorger, right? World Gorger Dragon, a beloved archetype of my own, that kind of fell off as not being a dedicated thing you want to do. But just the idea of like, oh my god, I can generate infinite mana and I can Spellseeker and like find the target. I guaranteed find the target to then kill them once I have infinite mana off my World George or whatever, right? That is cool. Survival of the Fittest. I had this exact moment with Survival of the Fittest, which it didn't even cross my mind when we were voting on Survival, when we were discussing Survival. But I was like, oh my god, Dredge. I can play Survival and Dredge. And you know what? Reanimate got pointed. So now I can't play Reanimate and Dredge, but I can play Survival. And that's cool. Like, I effectively broke even, but the fact that this card is off the list makes me want to play a deck, right? Makes me want to try some other goofy creature combo strategies. Makes me want to play the good creature combo strategies. Makes me want to play, yeah, as Rachel's mentioning, Rexer. Like, the fact that I can now play Birthing Pod, Survival of the Fittest, Recurring Nightmare, all in the same deck without any points attached to them. You can relive your 2016 dream and have a great time doing so, win or lose, because you are taking game actions and making decisions and reliving the glory days. You're getting all the different things that are so important for these community-driven formats, right? Speaking of which, I'd like to talk about Survival of the Fittest. Before this announcement, Survival of the Fittest had been one of the longest standing inclusions on the Canadian Highlander points list and a former staple of creature combo and graveyard strategies alike. As time went on, we found players were reluctant to play Survival of the Fittest, rather spending their points on mana acceleration or different, less mana-intensive tutors. This would continue with every points announcement benefiting creature combo strategies. The council would like to make room for creature combo pilots to play Survival of the Fittest, and they never would, with all-in combo lists being rare and typically less. Wait, oh, I fucked this up. I'll rewrite this. And typically the less competitive exception. Sure, I'll do this for now. I need to rewrite that. While most of the stems, what? Most of this. Oh God. I'll tell you why this one's really clunky in a second. While most of this stems from changing design trends and the decklist limitations of singleton magic, the council believes that Survival of the Fittest is safe enough for creature combo pilots to have access to the enchantment unpointed for the first time in Canadian Highlander history. So yeah, this one's awkward. This one was another one awkward to write up because the way that I would explain Survival of the Fittest getting off the points list in terms beyond the card's just not really good enough to play as a point is a little too... It's one that is more... It benefits more from being orated, from hearing it, you know, in very commonplace terms. So, Survival of the Fittest, it's been on the points list forever. Like, since the creation of the points list. Because it's Survival of the Fittest. It has history, right? Outside of Canlander. Has a ton of history in Canlander. There was a point where Survival of the Fittest was even 2 points. Right? We got to the point where Survival was definitely not a 2-point card. It was made a 1-point card. But then we didn't really see Survival. It would occasionally pop up because you want to play Survival of the Fittest. I'm playing a creature combo deck. I'm doing something with Birthing Pod or whatever. I'm setting up a Kiki combo. I want Survival of the Fittest. And but other than that, other than those rare exceptions, and specifically being in these all-in versions of the creature combo, players were not playing Survival. And so we have this thought process internally of like, well, we can't unban Survival of the Fittest because it's 2 mana to play, enchantments are awkward to interact with, it's repeatable, it's instant speed. We surely can't unpoint Survival of the Fittest. We're going to unpoint Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod gets unpointed. Nobody's playing Survival of the Fittest. All right, well, we're going to reduce the points on Natural Order. We reduce the points on Natural Order. Nobody's playing Survival of the Fittest. Fuck. Okay, well, Demonic Tutor's going down, and hell yeah, Spellseeker's already gone down. Now, for sure, they're going to be playing Survival of the Fittest. Nobody's playing Survival of the Fittest. Okay, well, this stupid Dredge deck exists, right? And they just got some extra points with Strip, and they're just playing whatever? Sure. We're going to be giving them Survival of the Fittest. And then they're not even playing Survival of the Fittest. Or very rarely are playing Survival of the Fittest, but obviously this is a bit of an outlier. And so we finally reached a point where it's like, okay, you won't play Survival of the Fittest when it's pointed. We're going to unpoint Survival of the Fittest. And now, chances are, it will see play. But it might not. There are spots where you might not want to play Survival of the Fittest. There are spots where you might not want to dedicate spots to this kind of card because, well, it's 2025. Slots are incredibly competitive, even in a 100-card deck, especially because of Singleton. And for what it's worth, Survival of the Fittest is on this weird curve where Survival gains a lot of strength because we are 100-card Singleton, and you want to be able to find your silver bullets or your toolbox cards. But those don't really exist anymore. Or if they do, they can be found through other less mana-intensive means, like Green Sun Zenith, or Eladamri's Call, or Urza's Saga, or Eldritch Evolution, Neoform. Like, there are ways to find your toolbox cards that don't require you to pay points. And if you are paying points for them, they are so flexible through like Demonic Tutor or whatever that you're not going to want to play points for the survival, or you're not going to want to be playing this kind of card anyways. So survival gains, it had a lot of added usage like back in the day, right? I say back in the day, but I'm referring to like an era of like 2016 to 2020, right? Where the singleton nature of the format made it more appealing to play more tutors. That is still the case for creature decks, but the quality of creatures and frankly the quality of creatures and the reduced cost of them, making it a lot easier to justify putting in mana for your Finale of Devastation or your Eladamri's Call or whatever into your answer, has always kind of pushed survival out of that position, and also still having the downside of like, well, you're not getting 4 Vengevines. You know, if they deal with your 1 Hogak, that's it. There are certain combo decks that if they use survival to sculpt what they're doing and you interact with the right piece, then they just can't combo you that way. And then they have to pivot, and we're okay with that. We're okay with that kind of pivot, right? So yeah, survival of the fittest, long-standing, blah, 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 reluctant to play, less mana intensive, cover that, benefit the creature combo. They didn't want to play the creature combo, exception to the rule, yada, yada, yada. Great. So that's survival of the fittest. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding survival of the fittest? Will Maverick be playable? Yeah, sure, why not? Maverick's already playable. We had tournament winning Maverick lists in the past like three months or so. There's like Abzan and Green White have showed up and like won a tournament. That is basically the base level for playing a deck in Canadian Highlander. Can you win a tournament with it? And there are a ton of decks that can win a single tournament in Canadian Highlander, or win repeat tournaments in Canadian Highlander if you start to, you know, gain some familiarity with the list or whatever. The repeat? Black White Shitters? My Flash Rector deck? No, I do have Flash Rector on the menu. That is a deck that I would like to play this year. Oh, you won the House and Cards in October. Where's the I guess I could just search Maverick, because I know one of them or two of them were listed as Maverick. Yeah, take a look at this. Bam. Oh, that's not how. Look at this. Naya Maverick. I mean, this is from last year, but you're probably still fine. You got Abzan Maverick winning a weekly tournament. Is this a league? Winning a weekly tournament. I think these are both weeklies. Multiple players winning events with Abzan Maverick decks. There's a Naya Maverick deck down here. Yeah. That's a thing you can do. And then last but not least, I talked about this mostly up at the top of the show, but I'll comment on it now. There were additional cards discussed but not voted on. Moxen. So in previous announcements, if we discussed cards and then voted on them, even if the votes were unsuccessful, they would be noted, like this one right here, right? Like these are some votes that did not pass. But for the sake of transparency, we want people to know these are cards that were voted on. An extension of that are cards that were discussed but not voted on, either because we wanted to focus on different things with a points announcement, or we just felt like these changes are going to look to achieve similar goals, and we believe them to be ultimately healthier for the format, or are going to be an easier pill to swallow. But if they don't go far enough, or if it's not exactly what the greater community had in mind, then we can make changes on that. But we haven't voted. This is important. It's just we create, we have a discussion surrounding it. All I have written here is Moxen. There were other cards discussed either through the council or the Discord community, using with the polling and their discussions there, that are not listed here. Mostly because I want to try and temper expectations, right? I talked about expectations when it came to introducing more one-pointed cards, and I don't want to put down some of the things we talked about, balance, force of will, the One Ring, Nadu, right? I have relayed that they were talked about a bit through all of these paragraphs, but we didn't give them the same attention as we would normally give other cards that we had discussed. And people run wild with any kind of information like that, right? Like anytime you make the slightest nod towards a certain archetype or deck in a ban list announcement, people go, oh my fucking God, they're going to unban. Well, they did unban Splinter Twin, but they're going to unban Splinter Twin. Oh my God. You know, and it's just like, no, that's not happening here. But we did talk about Moxen, right? We talked about the position of Moxen in the format. We talked about the position of Moxen in relation to all the 1-point cards in looking to reduce the amount of Mox draws, maybe reduce the amount of decks that are on triple Moxen. We've decided to go through the approach of addressing some of these new 1-pointed cards that even in a world with 4 Moxen, or Moxen at 4, you're going to want them to be at 1 point. You're going to want them to be trimmed on how much they appear, because the issue isn't necessarily how popular Moxen are or how prevalent Moxen are, because that's not always going to be true depending on the metagame, but it's more what they are doing with the Moxen as well, and whether or not these cards are an issue. Like, are these cards issues because of Moxen, or are they issues all the time that are only exacerbated because of Moxen, right? And usually, you know, you want to address the fast mana, not necessarily the payoff, but some of these payoffs are also problems, right? Like, was Dark Ritual a problem? Absolutely. But you know what was also a problem? Necropotence, right? Weird 5-0 in Minsc Boo when the last announcement was 5-0 or 05. Well, look when the last announcement was made. The last announcement had Minsc Boo going 05 was October 2023. That's over a year ago. There's a lot of Magic cards that have been introduced in that time frame. Yeah, Saga is a 1-pointer. A year and change happened. A year and change that also involved Modern Horizons 2 or 3. Oh God, there's a 4th, isn't there? Yeah. That's going to be my summary on this. But if anybody has questions, comments, concerns, now is the time to do so. Now is the time to do so. People, what about the dumb dog? Oh, Comet. Nah, Comet. I mean, as much as I hate Comet, my relationship with Comet is I would rather this card not exist than have its points like removed or have it pointed, I guess is what I'll say. What the fuck? Oh, it was still highlighting that. Oh no. I hate Comet, but I don't think Comet is not really a card that we're talking about right now. Yeah, it's fucked up. It's boring. It's an uncompetitive card, but uncompetitive is not a term that gets thrown around in Magic the Gathering, mostly because there's the variance gets tied to mana bases, not coin flips and die rolls. Minsc Boo is more oppressive than the One Ring. They are different cards that do different things. But and they play differently and have different counterplay. It's hard to compare them because the only thing that they share is that they're 4 mana. I mean, I guess they were also printed outside of standard release. Tomb and Saga being pointed, a couple of important lands that have now real cost and deck inclusion. With that in mind, is there any thought to keeping an eye on Strip at 1 as maybe being too strong again? Yeah, Strip is always a weird thing because, like, do you realistically want to encourage more players to strip each other? Right? Like, the answer is probably no. But also, Strip is a part of this metagame. It is a part of this format. There is a cost associated with it. And so far, Strip at 1 has been pretty good. If I get stripped out, yeah, they paid the points. I deserve it. Cards are cheaper. Spells are cheaper. Like, it is not the end of the world getting stripped. Sometimes it can be tough depending on the archetype, but yeah. Strip is always a card that we're going to have our eye on, right? Like, there are some cards on the points list that no matter what they're at, we are going to be thinking about them basically every time, because while fun is subjective, we typically like to get players to play with their Magic cards. And sometimes that is a lot more difficult, right, than you would imagine. Fuck Urza Saga. Thank you for making your show it up less. Yeah, sure. What percentage of hits do I think you need to play Amped Wrapped? I don't know. I don't know. I'd play like maybe 5 3-drops if I'm doing that, but I'm not the person to ask on this. What makes you want a card removed versus just pointed? I don't like the play. Like, my issues with Comet aren't necessarily ones that can be solved by it being pointed. And I don't think the points list is the appropriate use. I don't think the points list is the appropriate tool to use to deal with my issues surrounding that card. Because they're also mostly just individual issues, not format issues. Is Balance still good? Balance is great. Balance is a card that we've talked, like, Balance is a card that there is a lot of discussion about Balance going back to 1 being held on like the Discord and online communities. Balance is a fucked up Magic card, and maybe not the best one to free roll. Balance has always been an awkward card though, because Balance has always been a, like, unplayable at 1, maybe too good at 0, but at least at 0, it's a bit more niche in its application, you know? It can be used as a tool for, like, well, we know the mid-range decks aren't playing Balance, so that's nice. We know that the 4-color blue piles or 3-color blue piles aren't playing Balance, so that's nice. Moxen going to 4. Oh, I talked about the Moxen going to 4 for a solid 20 minutes. Hot Frappuccino, excuse me. Do I have a link to the Discord? Yeah, I do. It's also, I mean, it was on my Blue Sky and my Twitter. This is the Discord link. Why did it move to that? Oh, because it opened the Canadian Highlander Discord. I see. What's the deck I'm most excited to play after? Probably Dredge. I'd like to try Dredge again. I didn't even think about Dredge when we did the points changes, and then I had oh my god! I haven't played Dredge in a while. It's probably still bad. You mentioned discussion with the Discord community. I'm curious how much input is used in your decision making at this point as Canlander continues to spread globally. I mean, we approach the Discord community the same way that we're going to approach basically any community, right? I am not as active on the Discord as I would like to be, mostly because anytime I post on an online forum, I get tagged into oblivion and often not tagged for anything relevant to the discussion. Which can be very distracting and also very time consuming, having to deal with that and not wanting to look like an asshole. So one of the best ways I can do that is disengage at times. That said, yeah, it's a community like any other, right? It has its biases. It has, they have their preferences. They have, there are players on the Discord that are incredibly active. All they do is play Canlander, and they build up reputations with archetypes and biases. And like Victoria to the Seattle or the Portland community to the fucking Missouri community, right? Like, they're going to think about, they're going to think about certain cards being overpowered, certain things being the way it should be. It's just another community. It is, however, a community that is composed of people that are active in other communities, which provides a bit of a niche kind of scenario there. But yeah, I don't know what you want me to say other than like, we listen to all communities. We take all the communities into consideration. If they reach out to us, I talk about this anecdote for a long time where like I received an email where somebody was saying like, hey, I'm from this location. We have like weekly tournaments where we get like 16 people. Format's great, but here are some cards, like we're all very confused as to why they're not pointed. And they're like, why isn't Recurring Nightmare pointed? Why isn't Library of Alexandria 2 to 3 points? And you can look at that and be like, wow, that's fucked up. What kind of group of players would have this thought process? But then you talk to other groups and they have similarly fucked up takes. You talk to Victoria players and they have messed up takes. I talk to legitimate professional Magic the Gathering players, right? That play Canadian Highlander, asking them about their takes on the format. And they throw up some suggestions that are, wild. Not in like, I don't approach any of these. I can't speak for other people, but I imagine the council is full with people that have been dealing with this kind of stuff for quite a long period of time, right? There's always people talking about this. I make jokes about On-Crop Crasher going to 2 points a lot. But like Magic players that are just, frankly, they're just better than us. They are better players than myself and likely than all of you. Right? Asking or talking about very interesting approaches to pointing that if some schmuck at the local brings it up, I'm probably not, I'm going to kind of roll my eyes, but then it's like, no, hold on. We got to talk about this. We got to take all this in with a nice level amount of appreciation, right? If Sam Black comes up to me and says, have you thought about Mental Misstep to 1? I'm going to think about what it means to have Mental Misstep at 1 point, but I'm also going to think about what it means to have Sam Black come up and say, hey, have you thought about Mental Misstep to 1? Right? If like Pascal Maynard ends up talking about like, so this is the best deck in the format, right? There's no way this isn't the best deck in the format. And you're like, I haven't seen anybody play this deck locally, or I haven't seen anybody play this deck on the Discord. It's like, that's a weird statement to make. That's kind of a weird thing if I received a random email saying that. But when it's Pascal Maynard telling you this, and you look at the community, like the Quebecois community, and they just have a bunch of PT regulars that have played or whatever, and they're telling you about these changes, you got to be like, oh shit, yeah. Yeah, build a rep, then throw your bad ideas around. I didn't become the most winningest player in Victoria history. No longer accurate, I'm sure. To sit here and go, hey, Caracas is always going to be 0 points. Fuck your brim ass, baby. Force the will to 1. Right? I didn't do that for nothing. But yeah. No. I've got to be number 2 still. Actually, Chris might be number 1. It's got to be Chris. It's got to be like Chris, then Robin, then me. Although Robin fell off too. Getting old. It's okay. Canlander post-pandemic is all Mickey Mouse rings anyways. Yeah, I would buy the top 5 being Chris, myself, Robin, or Chris, Robin, myself, you, and then Josh. Where is Surge? That's not entirely fair. What if we weigh the year ends heavily? I didn't qualify for the year end like 3 years in a row or something. I'm washed up. I'm very vocal about how washed I am. The point is, I know I got a little jokey with that, but the point I'm trying to make is that we try to listen to as many metagames as possible. We try to not necessarily favor one metagame over another, and we try to be open-minded when it comes to pointing cards. Because that was an issue that we had in the past of like brushing off the idea of pointing cards like Urza Saga, like Psychic Frog, Ren and 6, right? Like, how long did it take before we got a fair card put on the points list? And even then, Ren and 6 has that deniability of like, well, you could strip lock people. That's fucked up. Which it is. But, you know, that's a card where it's like, yeah, maybe this card just really minimizes the kind of decks that you can play, and it makes it too easy to play 4-color, and it also has the strip lock potential, and it's worth the 1 point, you know? That's something we're looking to move away from. We are trying to be more open-minded. We are trying to communicate with as many metagames and players as possible. And because of Discord, because of large Magic cons, because of these events and traveling, we get to do that more than ever, right? Like, Canadian Highlander has really boomed in the past 4 to 5 years, right? The format was getting bigger. There was a lot of attention on Loading Ready Run, and the Victoria meta was popping off, and people wanted to watch it, and Seattle metagame and Vancouver had player bases, and there were little pockets and whatnot. But now, and especially after the pandemic, we have tons of communities putting up massive numbers for weeklies and monthlies with players that are so fucking good at Magic the Gathering, right? Professional level players and whatnot. We have communities all around the world. At Amsterdam, MagicCon Amsterdam, there were so many Canadian Highlander players, we got asked to move out of our play zone. There were too many of us. There was, 93? It was like 89 or 93, like just under 100 Canlander players at MagicCon Amsterdam. And getting to like talk to all these players about the format and see what they're playing and all that was huge. Getting to, you know, when I got to visit the shop in Berlin and play against the folks there, the players that play European Highlander and also play Canlander, you know, wanting to hear that input. All this stuff. We pull it from everywhere. Hey, Emma. Actually, perfect. Yeah. How you doing? How you been? Excited to play more Canlander at MagicCons this year. Yeah, I'm so stoked. Like every time we do a MagicCon meetup, there's just a ton of people from all different communities and countries and continents playing together. And we got to listen to all that, which takes time, but I think it has made a better process when it comes to curating this format, right? Yeah. Killed off the small Canada community in Jersey. That sucks. I remember when I was in Jersey for the GP, or what were they called? Magic Fest? When I was in Jersey for the Magic Fest and I heard, like, I got to witness the folks from NYC talk to the folks from like Jersey City and in Jersey be like, oh shit, we should merge these together. Beautiful. Beautiful. And hearing that like NYC had people playing like bi-weekly stuff, it was lovely to hear. Yeah, when I wasn't sick as a dog. But even playing Canlander and on the Sunday and getting fucking Ameria Shepherd oathed into play and be like, that's what's up. That's what's up. All right. I'm going to call it there, because I'm going to have to go and talk about these changes again for the next hour and a half, and I want to have something resembling a voice by then. If you want to watch this again, it's going to be uploaded on YouTube basically as soon as it's done. It's going to be available on Twitch. Myself and some of the other counselors are actively discussing these changes and talking to people on Discord as well. But yeah, overall, oh, this is my Discord. Overall, yeah, the points changes were received very positively. We are happy to make these changes. We're excited for what this means, maybe for stuff down the line. And we hope that the council has made some strives towards communication and transparency that, you know, that aren't just info dumping, but also let folks know that, like, hey, we're people. We're people behind this. We're just like you. We're just Magic players playing Canadian Highlander. We're just trying to make the format as you know, good as it can be. So I'm going to call it there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is going up on YouTube, so the YouTube's over there. There is my Discord here, but the Canadian Highlander Discord, is it this command? Is it this command? Yeah. I will link the Canlander Discord in chat again. You can check that. And yeah, I'm going to drop you kids off somewhere. There will be also, there's going to be more discussion surrounding this. Right. You have other Canadian Highlander content, other Canadian Highlander content engines putting out shows on this, topics on this. I believe there was I think Joking put up something. I think there was one that got put on the Discord. There's going to be a North 100. I'm sure there will be like a council judgment for it. If you want more, there will be more. In the meantime, I'm going to drop you all off at Voxy. Yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Again, you can ask on the Canlander Discord. You could ask me on Twitter or on Blue Sky. You could ask in my Discord. Like, I'm more than happy to chat about these kind of things, but I'm mostly excited. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will be streaming tomorrow, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.